Okay, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the City Council study session. First agenda item is the financial report. Our Finance and Administrative Services Director, Kathleen Wrinkle, is present to give us the monthly financial report. Good evening,
Thank you,
Director
Mr. Mayor,
Wrinkle.
council members. The first page has some really good numbers on it. I'm cautiously optimistic, but a little bit excited as well. We have, just in the general fund, we have revenue of $44 million, and our expenditures are only, well, almost $42 million. So, and this is preliminary, granted, but we're not expecting too much more to hit. So we're expecting to end the year just in the general revenue, or general fund, with about a $2 million, hopefully, carry forward that we can put into our fund balance. So that's really good news. I would like to point out at the bottom of the first page, there is on the employee benefits to the far right, you'll see that we've got a preliminary ending balance that's negative, about $74,000. And that's because we've got 1 week of payroll that's still in the process because the last payroll of the year straddled 16 and 17. So we're still working on getting that booking in. And once that's in, that should come positive again. So on the next page, I would like to point out that our current year projection is for revenue to exceed expenditures by about $800,000, and that's on a budget basis against what our budget was. On the following page, I'd like to point out that the sales and use tax is a little lower than we expected, about almost $550,000, but we had all the other taxes almost make up for it. So at the bottom line, you can see that our revenues are only $12,000 less than what we budgeted, and that puts us at 100%. We do still have some December collections that may occur and adjust, and we're hoping that those do come in, and then that'll take us into the positive range. So on the general fund expenditures, page 4, you can see at the bottom of the first two columns the original budget and the December 16 for the total expenditures. There's the $2.3 million that we are lower than the budget. So we underspent our budget. We do still have some bills coming in, so that could adjust a bit. Right below that, this is a new section we put in to explain that we have some budget adjustments that did not occur during the year. We move people from one department to another based on a strategy of how the work fit. But we didn't move the budget dollars. We thought we'd wait till the end of the year and see if we needed a supplemental or if we could just accommodate them in the budget we had. The city manager office does need some of that adjustment. And so what we've done, and it was in the plan anyway, is we moved one person, almost or a little over one person from Parks and Rec to the city manager. And that was to fund the budget analyst position that was there. And a little bit out of finance and administration as well, to help cover that. Any questions on that one? Okay. On the general fund balance on page 5, our target is to have 16.7% held in fund balance for general fund, and our current anticipated level is 18.1 by the end of the year. So we're going to be a little better than policy. The next page, page 6, is a recap pretty much of all the numbers we just saw for revenue and expenditures. On page 7, and we don't typically talk about this page too much, I would like to point out that as you notice towards the end of the graph, the right-hand side, how much our sales tax is leveled out over the 16. So we're not seeing a huge increase in sales tax. Just want to make sure that you're aware of that as we go forward.
Question about that. From what I understand on that cumulative, we're still gating the same level, right? We're still. Some people look at that graph and say we're making money, but we're kind of we're comparing it to the previous,
to the prior year. That's true. Okay. On page 8, this talks about our areas. And again, our problem area was, still is, Area 7, the outside sales. And we've actually gained some ground. We were about $500,000 short about the May time frame. And you can see at the end of the year now we're at $370,000 short. So we did gain some ground there. Still below what we'd like to see, but a little more ground. Page 9 does your comparison of areas from year to year. And then page 10 is, again, just a summary with the variance comments on the different areas. All in all, I think we're in a really good position this year and carrying a little bit forward into next year.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilmember Bertine.
Was there any reason why this wasn't in our packet? Because, I mean, this is really important information. I think you do a really good job, and it's very unusual for you not to have this available for our packet. We just got it tonight.
You did just get it tonight? I
It was
saw
in
it
the
online.
packet. She just gave us a hard copy this
The
evening.
hard copy? Oh, I thought that you were giving us something different than what was in there.
No, no.
Because I couldn't look at this and compare it in 5 minutes.
No.
So, all right. All right, I just want to make sure.
Kind of freaked us out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what?
Other questions?
Well,
or
when there's
comments?
another handout like that, then you might want to let me know that it's the same,
didn't
that you
realize
didn't
that
change
somebody
anything.
handed out a
I didn't
hard
think you would
copy.
want to go do all this work if you were giving us the exact same information. So,
No.
thank
Apologize
you.
for the confusion.
All right, I appreciate it. I like the color version. Okay,
Okay.
not necessary.
They knew that. That's why
Other-
they gave you a printed copy, I guess.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, we're going to move on to agenda item 2. Thank you so much. That is Citizen of the Year selection. This isn't for some consensus direction. Our communications manager, Allison Carney, is present to discuss the Citizen of the Year selection process. Good evening, Allison.
Good evening. So you have the material in your packet, the draft that was proposed last spring. So the question for council tonight is just whether you want to move ahead with that nomination process that you have in your packet or make changes to it, and then also the timeline that when you want to get that started.
Let's start with questions. Does anybody have questions regarding the proposed nomination and selection process as per the draft that was included in our packet? Councilmember Martinez.
I just have a question on how folks are going to submit this. Is it going to be a form on the website, or they send an email with all the information to you, or how does that gonna work?
We could make it a fillable form that they would submit, and it would come to our email.
Okay, cool.
And we could also have hard copies in the city manager's office.
Other questions? Councilmember Brandon?
How are we picking how are we going to pick the people? What kind of process do we want to do how are we going to make a decision on who's on this council?
As far as who's the Citizen of the Year?
Yeah, the committee.
Allison?
So the selection committee would be council, and we have listed some criteria that you may want to weigh, and then that would be up to council how they want to rate, if it's equally or if some categories are weighed more or less. So we would leave that to council to decide if you want to come up with a rating system.
And that's kind of what I thought. And would it be possible for us to try and see if we could, I don't know, I kind of always envisioned this a little bit more as a citizen committee as well, too. So I was kind of, I appreciate that the citizens would be submitting it, but when we said that it would be a citizen process, I kind of thought that either that or maybe each council person could put somebody on a board or something. I don't know, but I'm not sure that we're getting away from city council picking and doing this. I don't see it as being different enough to kind of satisfy some of the concerns that the public had about it being kind of this in-house thing. And so whatever you guys think about that, you can.
Other comments on that? My thought is that I think part of the concern is just that the number of nominations weren't very high. I think the process that's been outlined by staff will hopefully at least gather more input from the community about who they see doing active things and being positive in our community. So I'm comfortable with this personally. I like the idea that we'll get a long list of nominees and that council has a subjective standard, of which they can kind of make a decision and support one candidate over the other. But we did hear a recommendation here, I think, from Councilmember Barentine of the idea of a citizen selection committee that would actually make a recommendation to City Council for the Citizen of the Year. Does anybody like that concept more than what is being proposed? Other thoughts or comments? Councilmember Russell?
Actually, I think it might be good to have citizen input at that level as well. I'm not exactly sure. It kind of leaves us in the decision making again.
So do we want to punt that decision, or do we want to retain that decision-making ability on the Citizen of the Year? My thought, and I think maybe weren't as descriptive as staff. I think staff kind of, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, was thinking that we still wanted to make the ultimate decision. And so if we're telling them that we want to have a committee, then maybe that's a little bit different structure that they could bring forward again to make a recommendation on the Citizen of the Year. Because again, this is just bringing forward a laundry list of names and accomplishments. Councilmember Olson.
I think that all along the issue was just getting more of a robust list of people to decide from, and I think the council should have to make that choice because they know a broader public than most do. So I'm in favor to try it this way for a year because it's a big change and seeing how it goes, and then the next year perhaps there's another adjustment.
You have another comment?
We're not talking about it this year anyway, though, are we? We're too late.
Oh, we're this year? No, we're talking our anniversary in May. Thank you. May 13th. I forget your birthday. May 13th.
So, actually, it's fine with me, Linda's suggestion that we go ahead with it the way it is, and then reevaluate after the fact.
I'm in concurrence with that. Others have comments. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
I'm going to agree with Ms. Russell and Ms. Olson that we just go with.
Great. Any other issues, further questions or comments? Councilmember Barentine?
I'd like to see how it goes this time, and I think part of the concern from the community was that we weren't getting people from the community. We were getting all ex-mayors and ex-council people and ex-city people, and it was not as diverse for what really happens in our community. So I'm willing to go with Councilmember Olson and see whether this brings forward that kind of diversity that we're looking for, or if we just, because it just kind of looked like an insider thing. And we have some amazing people doing some awesome things in this community that were never really coming to the front, and we were kind of, in our own bubble about what was going on here, or with boards and commissions, or with, people serving as elected. So let's see what this process brings, and then we'll go forward. We'll see if we do it different next year.
Any final comments or thoughts? Councilmember Olson?
I just want to say if we look at the last 5 to 6, 7 years, maybe even, that it wasn't elected officials, that actually community leaders from a number of different ways. One not even a member, not even an Englewood citizen anymore, someone who was involved in education, and that probably was one of the more contentious ones. So I think that having many more ideas coming in is really what the issue is about, and having a process for that. So I think it's a good, thank you to the staff for putting this together. I think it's well done. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your efforts here. Any final comments on this?
I would just point out that we'll have it open for the month of February, so I would just spread the word, and we can point people in the direction.
Maybe send the council a link, and that way we can disseminate that a little bit.
So it'll be for the full month.
Will it go out to all the boards and commissions and to all, so that they get it and they can nominate people?
Yeah, it can. And
sometimes they won't do anything.
Yeah, we can push it out as, yeah.
Mr. Keck?
And Mayor, too, what we want to discuss, and perhaps we can do this later at the end of the meeting under agenda setting, is setting up a separate time to evaluate the applications that are turned in, or nominations, so that it may not necessarily have to be interfering with your study session, or maybe a different night, but we can discuss that later. Just keep that in the back of your minds as well.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. Councilmember Martinez, did I skip you on something? Did you have a final comment?
I just wanted to kind of follow up on what was discussed, if we had any particular plans about how to disseminate this to encourage more folks to nominate. I don't know if we've formalized anything or if we're just going to share it around or.
Yeah, I'm hoping Tom Munns can put it in the newspaper.
You got that? Cool.
He didn't say heck no, so I'll take that as a yes.
And then we'll post it on Nextdoor, Facebook, our website, and we can send out an e-notifier.
Okay, great.
Thank you for that. Appreciate your efforts with that. Let's move on to agenda item 3, that is communications contract discussion. Our Deputy City Manager, Murphy Robinson, is here to present and discuss a communications contract with Slate Communications. And I believe we have some representatives from Slate. Thank you for joining us again this evening. Welcome. Please come pull up and share.
Oh, there's 3 of you this time.
They're coming deep. I like this. Mr. Robinson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before we get started with the communications presentation from Slate, I just wanted to quickly go over kind of the history of how we got here with you all, just for about 30 seconds, just so you have some background context to why Slate's sitting in front of you today. So if you remember, at the end of about 2017 through about Q1 of 2016, we talked a lot in your council goal setting sessions, as well as just through your study sessions about communications. Talked about how to redevelop the communication strategies for the city, and how can we better communicate not only with our citizens, with you communicating with your electorate, and how are we communicating internally and the things that we're doing to you all, so that you all can go and spread the word. Through that, the city manager asked me when Mike Flaherty retired, who was in charge of communications, asked me to kind of take an overarching look of where are we at with our communications and how do we take it up to the next level. And looking through that process, one thing that you all helped identify is that we have a very siloed approach to communications. Siloed meaning each department kind of does their own little thing when it comes to communicating what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why we're doing it. And so with that, I then we hired Cahoots Communications to do what they called a 3D process. And the purpose of that 3D process was to understand the complexity of the communications issues and strengths that we are having in the city. And so they were not only to identify that, but kind of give us a plan or a recommendation on what we can do to move to the next level with our communications citywide. So with that said, they gave us that, they gave you all, as well as staff, the presentation. And the presentation was to include events, internal communications, external communications, a new Englewood magazine, an Englewood campaign theme, and graphic design. With all of those, it was bringing, the main purpose was to bring communications all together in creating a new communications department. Once you all gave consensus on August 15th. You like the plan, let's move forward. That's when Cahoots started to meet with the departments and started to get the different, all of those tools and all of those projects that they were currently carrying out. Needless to say, through those meetings, they realized that they bit off a little bit more than they can chew. When they recommended, their recommendation was for us to use them as our communications department, meaning that they would absorb all of what they recommended to us and help us carry that out as our communications department, which they said that they could do all of that for pretty much the cost of one person, in which we had one person, and we had that one person be the liaison to Coots. So, with that said, once that came to head, we realized that we would not have our contract with Cahoots, but we had to move forward, number one, because council gave consensus, also that the plan was very good, but we had to attack it in a different way. So what we did is we took those different elements of that plan, and we said, okay, how can we internalize some of this, making it part of our new communications department internally, and then what do we need to use the experts for to make sure that we can carry out the entirety of the plan. So with that said, internally what we did is we formally communicated and created the communications department with you all, as well as hired a communications manager and a graphic designer, and those dollars that were going to be used for Cahoots stayed internal for those efforts. Now, for the events, the magazine, the campaign, we still knew that we could not do those internally. We just don't have the resources, nor do we have the expertise or the capacity. And so with that, we said we put it out in RFP for those efforts, and we got responses, and Slate Communications won that bid. Now, I do want to go back and explain to you why we didn't go out for RFP the first time when Cahoots completed their 3D. And the process with that was that they came to us and said, we can be your entire communications department. I said, oh, wow, that's wonderful. I did call around, and I asked other communications department or other communications businesses, is this possible? Can you all do this? Can we have a quote? And every communications business that I talked to said, sorry, we're not in that business. We don't do wholehearted communications departments for people. And so at that point, once we brought you all the contract, I was going to write sole source for that contract. And so because that never came to head, that's why never saw that sole sourcing. And so I did want to explain to you why the RFP after instead of before. That's why. Because they were going to do the entirety of the department, it was going to be a sole source venture. And so with that said, unless you have questions for me, I'd like to hand it over to Slate.
Thank you. Quick question for you, Councilmember Russell.
I do have a question in that we did get a resignation letter from Cahoots that said she was leaving because the CEO got fired.
Yes.
Could we have more information about that?
Absolutely. So the other piece of this was during those meetings with all the departments, there were lots of things that were being said to our staff members that we didn't find was professional or appropriate. Some of the things that were being said was, we're meeting with you because we have a love for the city and we don't need you, you need us, and things like that. I won't continue to say quotes, but the staff wasn't happy. The staff wasn't happy at all. And matter of fact, we had 10 complaints from various departments, and so I then met with her and her staff. I met with her first to talk to her about things, but she actually got sick. And so she said, whatever you have to talk to me about, talk to my staff. They have full control of the business just like I do. So we had a meeting about that, and this was actually our final meeting about the contract, and we got the things in the contract pretty much settled. They said they had to go back and deliberate. But our final pieces of that conversation was, you can't come and talk to our people that way. Number one, you're a representative of us. You're a representative of council because you presented to council, and they had consensus. And when you're telling people these type of things, that's not teamwork. Number one, nor is it a good way to communicate. And so I asked for there to be a different representative for this account that was forward-facing for our account, and the staff there actually agreed with me, who met with me, and said, from now on we'll have the vice president be our forward-facing person, and they apologized profusely. I'm sorry that this happened. We actually agree with you. It won't happen again. And so after they went back and told her that there would be someone else to be the forward-facing person, she wasn't happy with that, and so she said that I fired her. And so I didn't fire her. I can't fire someone. All I did was ask for there to be a different forward-facing person. I thought that she's a wonderful person, but I will never, ever stand for someone to degradingly speak to our employees the way that she did, and or, especially when we're going into a contract negotiation with people, making sure we set the precedent that if we're going to communicate and we're going to be doing these ventures with you, come with professionalism. And so that was kind of what happened there.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up. The thing that concerns me is that we haven't heard about this until right now. And it was council that made the decision, and that did not come back to council. I'm sure council would have agreed with you on that, but it's very troubling that it wasn't brought to council in a timely manner.
Thank you. And I will say that I weighed that heavily. I really did. And the major piece of why Cahoots didn't get into a contract with us was because they were overwhelmed with all the projects that we had as a communications department. I think that was an easy way for them to get out of the negotiations with us, to be honest with you. But I do think that the biggest piece of this was that they couldn't fulfill what they said they could fulfill. And so I apologize if I should have bought that to you earlier. In hindsight, probably should have, but I did think it was more of a personality thing more than a professional thing. So I apologize, Councilmember Russell.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barentine?
How much was the Coots contract for?
So the 3D contract was for $24,000. Now the other piece of that is while we had a lot of other things going on, and we didn't have a communications department, a lot of departments use Cahoots for various things. For example, the Allen Water Treatment Plant communication was one. But that was separate out of the contract as different departments called them and used them for services, other services.
Altogether, how much did Cahoots get paid prior to this final contract that didn't go through?
I believe you have the numbers, ma'am, but I believe it was the $24,000 plus probably another $20,000-ish.
Okay. Because you're on record as coming to a study session and publicly stating that you fired them. And what the comment was, as verbatim as I can get it, is that they were taking up too much time of the staff, and that's what was stated. So you're kind of saying that, but not giving us the information of what was going on. And then, quite honestly, this is the reason RFPs are written, so that you have everybody's up front. We're up front about what you're expecting from somebody, and they're up front about what's expected of them, and then we get the best price. Because part of how you pick Cahoots, also on the record, was that you were cleaning out the office, saw that they had done some work for them before, and then you contacted them.
I sure did.
So maybe we need to implement a process and procedure and stick with that so that it best protects us from these kind of things. I need to know how much of the work product that they did will be the foundation for what these guys now take on, of what's left over. And I will share at least a concern that anytime we have a contract with somebody like that, whether it's Transformation Point or Cahoots, when you start dealing it out to where different departments are doing these things, that it does start to look like it's avoiding some of the process. So if they're going to do work for any department in the city, that it be combined so that we reach that limit of the 50,000. If it's going to be more than that, then we really need to follow the process.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I will state that a big chunk, that $11,691, I agree with you. I did say that they spent too much staff time. That was part of the issues that I brought up that day, is they were meeting, and to be frank, when they were meeting with the different departments and getting ready for the contract, I wasn't aware that they were charging us. They said to me, I need to meet with the departments to really understand what the different items are going to be. And at the end of that, because we didn't go into negotiations, they sent me that bill. And so I agree with you, Councilmember Barentine. Hindsight, I'd probably do something a little different.
I appreciate that. We all learn from mistakes. However, what steps are you guys taking to do that kind of oversight so that we don't end up with the same kind of concerns?
You're about to hear all of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Welcome again.
Hi. What a transition. Wonderful. I'm Kim Newcomer, CEO and one of the founders of Slate Communications. Thank you so much for having us back. I'm going to let my cohorts introduce themselves. Sir.
I'm Ryan Burke. I am also co-founder and the creative director.
And I'm Kristen Knoll. I am the communications manager.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I really do appreciate you guys setting aside some time to talk with us today. As I envision this conversation going, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about Slate. I don't think we had the time to properly introduce ourselves, so I want to share a little bit more about who we are and sort of the way we work. And then, per your request and comments from the last time we were in front of you, what we really want to do is go through exactly how we envision us fulfilling the scope of work as set forth in the RFP. And we'll take a good chunk of time to go through that in detail and answer any questions that you might have regarding those two issues. So if this is repetitive from last time, you're going to have to forgive me. But I'm going to do the whole spiel about Slate. We started Slate Communications about 4 years ago. And truly, we've built this organization based on the belief that informed and engaged residents make for better communities. And that's what we get to do. We get to work with communities throughout Colorado and help connect councils and city organizations with their residents. It's a lot of fun. It's a great opportunity for us to learn and share learnings across cities and county boundaries. And truly what we do is we focus in this type of communication. So I had to chuckle a little bit when Murphy was talking about, you don't find firms that willingly go into being government communications firms. You actually found one. This is what we do. This is what we love to do. And it's really a passion for us. So we've been doing this for 4 years. We currently have a staff of 8. We're a full-service firm, so that means we do everything from small tasks like web content updates and social media management to huge tasks like organizing major events and strategic planning for communications. So we really do run the gamut. We have graphic designers on staff. We have photographers. We have social media experts. We have writers. We're small but mighty, as I like to describe us.
And the 3 people that you see in front of you here have over 25 years of working in staff. So we come from different cities within Colorado. So we have worked with different departments and staffs within the city as employees. So we come from that background.
And I think that brings us to our approach. We've been on the other side of the table. We understand how important it is when you find a contractor. It's funny, we put together this proposal before we heard any of the backstory that we just heard this evening. But even before we heard that, we knew going in that a lot of communication is about trust and about really our approach to working with you is that of a collaborative nature. We want to make sure that we are adding value, that we are being respectful of your budget and your resources, that we are implementing as we say we would, and that's really our philosophy. We want to establish relationships with the folks in this room, with city staff, and with your community. We want to maximize the money that you spend through partnerships and being diligent with our time, and we want to deliver above your expectations. As I mentioned, this is our niche. We really do work with governments throughout Colorado and beyond. And what that allows us to do is bring some learnings and perspectives that perhaps you don't get when you're just working within your own community. And we'll go through a little bit more detail about how that fits specifically with this scope of work. When we talk about the magazine, this is something we have done for years and years, and in fact, on a national and local printed publication, among our staff, we've managed at least 6 of those. Now, that's major publications. What that doesn't include is printed newsletters or flyers that we mail out on a monthly basis or bill inserts. I'm talking major magazine production like you have in your RFP. And these are just examples of some of the covers that we've done. That's the City of Fort Collins Recreation Guide. Again, similar to this project where you're going to be combining your recreation guide and your magazine. And then this is the Go is the senior publication for Longmont. Events. You can't do communication without events. We, again, if you look at our staff, have this history of major community events produced. And how we describe major is more than 6,000 people at one time. So again, when you look at events across the gamut, we couldn't even count. We tried to start counting. We got over 100. We just said hundreds of community events where you're seeing anyone from 40 to 2,000 to 4,000. Again, we've been fortunate enough to do 2 examples right here. We did the 4th of July for Windsor 2 years ago. And that is, again, a smaller community. But, wow, do they pack them in for that event. And it's tens and thousands of people from all over northern Colorado. And then just last year, we were lucky enough to work with the city and county of Boulder, and we did their Bus to Work Day. And that was Ride, Relax, Repeat. And we worked through partnerships with RTD, with Transport, with City of Boulder, with Boulder County to really maximize that event and bring some people in to ride the bus. Again, a big part of the scope of work was looking at the state of the city. Between just the 3 people you have sitting in front of you, we counted up, we've managed or been a part of 11 different state of the city events, have some ideas on how to make that work for you as a community. And the examples you'll see in front of you were the City of Lone Tree, and Kristen can speak to their unique approach to the state of the city. We worked with Douglas County and really did all the visuals behind that. So we did their Prezi and integrated their video and all of their imagery. And then finally, the City of Fort Collins, when we were in-house there, I would always call it my January eye twitch, because it just would be such a stressful event. And every January I'd get an eye twitch. But man, we did everything from event production to script writing to invitations, promotion, interactive, social media, the whole kit and caboodle. And a ton of work, but man, so fun and rewarding at the same time.
And it was always a really creative process because we were working on a much smaller budget. But to be able to bring that much of the community together is always very successful.
And then finally, if you're looking at general marketing plans and campaigns, 22 different city and department marketing plans created. And this is just in the short lifetime of Slate. So within the 4 years. And we've worked with the town of Avon up in the mountains. We work with the city of Longmont, as we mentioned before. We're the marketing firm for the transport bus service up in the city of Fort Collins. And so really have this understanding of city services and how to market them and how to actually help support a brand within that marketing plan. I'm going to let Kristen walk you through exactly how we envision us fulfilling the work that you set forth in that RFP. And when you see these charts, you're going to curse my name because they're a little hard to read, but hopefully you do have the exact same information in front of you.
We heard you at the last council meeting that you wanted more information and details about how we would approach each of the line items in the RFP. So even though the spreadsheet is small on the screen, I know that you've had a chance to hopefully take a look at the spreadsheet in your packet, and you'll see that we are going to hit the ground running in February with a lot of research, first gathering information, working together and collectively with city staff and with your stakeholders to really get a strong foundation for the magazine. And we will also be looking to council for approval of 3 comp covers and 2 inside layout comps when we have decided on some designs for you to take a look at. The production timeline is pretty tight, and we're really looking forward to working together with the community and staff to make it happen. As Kim mentioned, we have a great staff of copywriters and photographers, and we've all worked on magazines and newsletters in the community to make it happen. We will have routine editorial meetings with staff and work on copywriting and layout and design throughout the process. As part of the project as well, we will assist with distribution. That includes printing and mailing, and also making sure that new local businesses also receive the publication. Because this spreadsheet is a little bit difficult to decipher, and it was easier for me personally to put it into a schedule by issue, the next page shows what we've proposed for the what we're calling the summer and fall issue, the fall and winter issue, and the winter and spring issue. As you'll see, we're going to, again, hit the ground running and start working on the foundational design in February, and in March, start with editorial content and copywriting, jumping right into design and print. And that will continue 3 times in 2017. And the first issue will hit mailboxes June 1st, covering July, August, and September. The fall-winter issue will hit mailboxes September 1st and cover October, November, December. And the winter-spring issue will hit mailboxes in December and cover January, February, March of 2018. The next item that we're really excited to work on is brand and marketing sponsorship. This is going to be very closely tied to the magazine, but also spills into sponsorships for all the special events as well. So once again, we're going to start in February with brainstorming new brand themes and interviewing staff to determine the best approach to sponsorships and efforts that you've used in the past and how we can move forward to grow that sponsorship program. We'll continue the brand and marketing plan into June, and we'll have a comprehensive plan by May, and we'll continue to see that plan through the end of the year. The sponsorship program, again, is really front-heavy in 2017, and the additional kind of times slotted in June and October align with special events and with the production of the magazine. On to signature events. We're really excited to help with 4th of July. We're proposing a holiday-type event and then a signature event to be determined once we've had an opportunity to meet with you and discuss with staff and really determine what is the best fit for the community. The signature event timeline is certainly to be determined. We don't even know what it's going to be, so we don't know exactly what time of year it will be. But looking at a July 4th event and a holiday event, we thought perhaps a fall event might be suitable. So the timeline you see in front of you is for a fall event, but we're flexible with that as we move through kind of the planning process.
In September? Is that kind of what you mean there?
September, right, exactly. And finally, we will assist with Parks, Recreation, and Library communications support. Because a lot of the projects that we'll be working on are at the beginning of the year, we're really going to focus on doing a staff needs assessment in August and September and work through a plan kind of in the middle of the year to balance out our time. And the last slide really is to show that we are going to be really engaged with staff. Obviously, we'll be talking with them on a very, very regular basis, and we anticipate coming to you all very regularly as well, especially at the beginning of the year. And then we thought, well, starting in July, we could meet every other month and do a wrap-up in December at the end of the year once the contract is complete.
So a couple of key points that I wanted to highlight. Hopefully what you saw in those work plans, per your request from the last time we all sat together, was more detail around when do we engage council and when do we get those, when do we sit down for your feedback, and when are other tasks outlined as well. So I hope that was really clear. Our suggestion also, per your comments the last time we sat down, is to include this as part of our contract. If we're going to create that sense of trust, we feel really good about the timeline that we set forth and the obligations that we're making and the cost that is entailed in those work plans. Now, I would love to say that every time we put together a work plan, it works perfectly and nothing ever shifts and changes, but then I'd be lying. But I promise when we do come back here, we will look at those work plans, tell you where we are in regards to them, and we take our deadlines very seriously, particularly when we're looking at events and publications. You don't get to wiggle, and we understand how important that is. We also do these work plans because we also want to share with you how tight that schedule is. In order for us to pull some of these things off, we really do believe we need to hit the ground running. And so that's why we moved on to our second suggestion. So we think there might be value in creating two different contracts instead of just the one. One for the state of the city and one for the other marketing and branding elements. And this is not because we don't think the state of the city is a good idea. I do. I believe state of the city events are truly valuable. But I don't feel like there is enough consensus from this group around what that looks like yet for us to honestly put together a scope of work and say, we will stick to this budget and here's what we're going to do. We might get there tonight. That would be great. Then I'd say let's add it back in. But what I don't want to do is put something together that feels made up and maybe doesn't meet your expectations. So given the timeliness of the other elements, we could create one contract that says, hey, this needs to get started in February and move forward quickly, and then another that says, hey, we need to get clear on what exactly this event is and how do we best support it. Maybe we can add some value. Maybe you don't need us for that State of the City piece. We don't know yet. But I do think it's worth a conversation, or at least something we're willing to entertain here tonight. And then the final piece I do want to mention, Kristen shared with you that there was 3 editions that were going to be produced in 2017. That's not going to be your normal schedule. You will have 4 editions every year, and that was some feedback that we heard from the group as well. It's a little bit of concern of that frequency of when are we reaching out to our community. We believe that you can get back to that every 3-month schedule, but just this first time around, in order for us to get that foundation, to get the approvals, to get your feedback, we're just not going to be able to pull off 4 this year. So this specific scope includes 3 editions, but you will get on a quarterly schedule after that.
Great, thank you. I heard very clearly from council at our previous session that we wanted to take the communications contract and the state of the city issues somewhat separately. So I'd like to start with comments or questions regarding the remainder of the communications contract as to what's been presented, and then we'll move on to the state of the city issue. Councilmember Olson.
Thank you for putting this together, and I like the ideas that you put in here. With the magazine, which I think is, I like the magazine idea. I've seen them in other cities. They've been a little bit larger cities, not this small, and they haven't been quite as, the span of age groups hasn't been so wide. We're an aging city and a very young city, and so we have a lot of people on the internet. We have a lot of people that are not. So I'm concerned about concerned about our constant communication with those who really are engaged in a age group that's more my age group and above, and knowing that it's not an electronic world for our group. So do you have ways we can overcome that challenge? Because it is one of the most commonly used source for information in the city.
Yeah.
It was like 87% or something last time we queried who reads it.
The Englewood?
The Citizen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we had some early conversations just around this exact point in terms of...
Sorry, I was not clear about that.
I had you. I'm with you. Well, because it's
talking
important.
About the Citizen for everybody else in the room versus a magazine.
Right.
The Citizen will go away with this model.
Right. I'm going to let Murphy go into the big answer on this one, but we did have some ideas around... First of all, it's preparation, right? So in these Citizen editions leading up to its transition, we really do need to let people know it's going to look different, it's going to look different, it's going to be different. And I think that's important, right? Nobody likes the shock of change, but maybe we can help people along with some education. The second idea seems really kind of simple, but I think it might work, and we can decide whether or not it's the right approach, is truly to keep its name. Right? It will look different. It will get a facelift, so to speak, but can we at least continue that brand equity of the Citizen and infuse some of the familiarity and maybe even pull some of the elements that exist currently in the Citizen into this new publication? And even if they're not there forever, again, I think it's part of that transition of how do we keep people engaged and keep them, meet them where they expect us to be.
But right now we do how many Citizens?
6.
I thought it was 6, and we're talking about going down to 3. So change is fine, and I think we've learned this in the Parks and Rec. Over communicating what's going to change is not. We should do that. We should over communicate. But in terms of then, there are 3 months that we won't be giving information. So what is the way to do that, to pick up that more current, in the moment kind of information for people who are not on the internet?
Yeah.
Or not, not on web-based.
On the web. So that's a great question, and we have talked about that extensively. And actually, we're talking about this year doing 3, but next year doing 4. So it would come out every quarter. But I actually would love to hear y'all's recommendations on how you think your electorate would like to be reached. I think utilizing the internet, utilizing the magazine, but what other avenues would you like to see? And I think we can make that happen. I think I can come up with 150 ideas, but I think having a more joint session on that of what do you think would, if you don't think the magazine is enough.
Well, I was hoping you'd come with the ideas
Sure.
of what has worked when you
Sure.
moved a city away from an every other month thing to something that's 3 or 4 times
Sure,
a year.
sure.
That's what I was hoping, that there'd be some other tried and true, and what the return on investment is of going to a magazine.
So I'll let you speak to Lone Tree, but when I was in Brighton, we actually did much of the same thing. We went from, I think it was 8 issues of the newsletter down to quarterly. And what the responses that we got, and we were worried about the same things, the responses that we got were that it was better put together because people felt like there was more substance to the articles, to all the items. And so that was my experience.
Am I the only one that's worried about that? Because if we are, we can end here.
That's right.
Okay.
I just got to shift it down.
So I'm the newest addition to Slate Communications, and I worked for the city of Lone Tree for 8 years up until November of this last year, and was the communications coordinator and oversaw Timberlines, the quarterly publication for the city. And they moved to a quarterly newsletter prior to my starting, and it was kind of a slow process, but I know that we had a large 24-page publication with a lot of content that was very well read. So we mailed to every single household, and we supplemented the print publication with posts on our website and in social media, and we pull out individual stories and graphics to share throughout the quarter until the next issue came. So it was constant communication, not just 4 times a year. We kind of spread the issue out, talking about events that were happening next week, and then we'd talk about projects that were coming down the line a little bit later, in the later months of the publication. So it was constant communication the whole time throughout the year with just 4 publications.
Anything else, Councilmember Rolson?
I think the point of that is it's never just one tool.
Right.
So as much as the citizen is read and loved and is important, we have to remember that any sort of communication strategy to be successful has to have more than one element. And the moment we rely on just one thing to get the message out is the moment we miss all those people that don't get just that one thing. And so I think Kristen's point is, as we develop the content of a new and improved citizen, how do we leverage the heck out of that work and that content and all of our other pieces? Some of that will be digital, and maybe some of it won't. And I think one of the elements that we can bring to the table is simply that of, have you guys considered X, Y, and Z? Have we thought about different print materials? Maybe it's not a mailed piece. That's expensive. It's really expensive.
There are bills that we get through utilities and other things.
Bill
that
inserts.
More could be done, and we've done that with the Water and Sewer Board. So there are other ways to get info out. But I like the idea of doing something new. I think we've needed a refreshed kind of thing for quite a while. I think this is the right thing to be doing. I just don't want to lose a big segment of our population that really does stay engaged. I'm one who uses a lot of media for things.
Right.
But I know a lot of people that don't.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
Thank you. I'm excited for what you guys are doing. It looks like it could be a wonderful product for us. And I have some of the same concerns that I think other council members may have here, is that, we do have an aging population that we cannot they have no desire to be online. I guess my concern is, I think they're becoming a smaller portion, but they're still a good portion of our city. But yet, me personally, I was a big magazine hold it person, and now I get all my magazines electronically, and they're interactive. And I would hope that if the city's going to have an e-magazine, that it becomes interactive, maybe even with some videos you can click on, and a great, like a letter to the editor, so that we can get responses, so that it's not just a tool from us to them, but it's also a tool back from them to us. And if we could have that as part of how we're going to look at how we're going to build this, I think that would help us go to that. And again, I think I'm torn with others that I know many seniors that I talk with all the time. They don't even want to talk to you by phone. They want you to come over and see them face to face. And so I don't want to lose that element. But if we can somehow have a limited version of that, I don't know. That's, I guess, what we'll pay you guys for. But I just want to make sure that we are going to have an electronic magazine, or a magazine that there's an e-issue and that it's interactive and comes back and forth. But I'm excited for what it looks like you guys are going to do. So thank you so much.
Right. So I mean, this has always been what we've dealt with, and with Slate is we have a very wide audience that we need to reach. We have an aging audience, we have a young audience, and so we try to put together the most versatile tools that we possibly can to reach them. And we have developed magazines and newsletters before that transfer over to the electronic format. So we do find that an important piece of the puzzle as well. And those are kind of more of the low-cost supplements as well, monthly inserts. So if it is a matter of just putting together monthly summaries to hand to as bill inserts, and that's something that can be done as well because that is also low cost. So there's these ways, but when we're looking at the majority of this outreach, it is through the magazine. So we're reaching a completely much wider audience, and then we're going to do supplement as well. So we have many ideas, as Murphy had said and we had talked about, of supplementing parts of the population that will be missing the citizen. So there are these solutions available. We've used them before. They're great, and we also want to make sure that what we do is we respect your community by serving up quality information. And we want it to sound good. We want it to look good. We don't want to throw something in the mail every month and just say, here's what's going on. We want to make sure that we show respect. And there's so many amazing things going on in your community. So what better way to do it than something that's a little bit more, robust and vibrant.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
I don't see the communication piece of it that different. But what I do appreciate, because they're getting it at home now, and it is where they get a lot of their information, and it is well read. But I think that there's been comments before, and I'm pretty sure through Mayor Jefferson's term, and of course through Mayor Pro Tem Gillett's term, where it's been brought up about doing even the Englewood Citizen on a quarterly basis. But I think having more content, having it more substantive, as you said, is really a good thing. I appreciate that. I don't think that we have a lot of information on the website, so as long as that's brought over as well, but I'm not sure that that's that much of a change. We're going to more of website stuff, and still having this isn't going to leave anybody out in the dark. I am concerned just about the transition time. So during that transition time, so for the first quarter, we would probably still do the Englewood Citizen as it exists currently. So we wouldn't even miss out this year. We would have four. We would just not do, 3 of them would be in that magazine format, and 1 would still be the Citizen as it is, with kind of a transitional acknowledgement that it's coming, a little town crier thing to say, hey, it's going to be different next time kind of thing. Okay.
Thank you. And Allison just informed me that we actually have 2 Citizens coming out before the 3 magazines. And so we'll have the 2 editions, and one of those editions will have a front page about the new magazine, kind of letting people know what that would
So
look
this
like.
year we'll actually have an additional.
We will.
One will have 5. Just helping you out here. I'm just letting you know. Now we're communicating more. So I think I think that's good. I really am not concerned as much about this whole magazine versus the web. I mean, we're already doing all of that piece, and you guys are addressing that. So I just like that it's going to be more substantive. I do think people have wanted that, and there's already been talk through the years of even taking the Citizen on a quarterly basis, which of course evens out some of the cost and stuff, than doing the additional mailing too, and having it just be more worthwhile. And even the rec center currently for theirs has some interactive a little bit of a piece where you can go on and see the thing, not to the extent that Mayor Pro Tem Gillett is speaking about, but a little bit you could do on the pages. But so I'm looking forward to this, and I was just concerned about how we were going to transition so we didn't have some big gap, and it's quite the opposite. We're doing extra, so that'd be awesome. Thank you for answering my question.
And thank you for bringing that up, because I also want to say we're doing the same thing with the recreation guide, so that we don't, so that we make sure that we're giving people enough time to plan for any programs that they want to register. So I think there's actually going to be crossover, and you guys will have to remind me of the schedule, but essentially there's a recreation guide going out to publication now, and what we'll do is we'll reprint part of the schedule with the first magazine edition, so that we don't leave recreation in the lurch either. They're still going to make sure that we double up, if you will, to make sure that everybody has seen with ample time all the recreation opportunities available to them, and then so we get back on our schedule. Some of those might be printed twice, like July's schedule.
Remind me again when the first magazine scheduled then to come out.
June 1st.
It's a memory test. Okay,
Oh,
thanks.
okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I first wanted to thank city staff and Slate for bringing forward what I think is an excellent plan. I'm really 100% supportive of what's been brought forward. This really helps us with three of the major themes that this council has discussed in communication, placemaking, and events, and this will be critically important for us to reach those goals. I'm very supportive of the magazine. I like the idea of combining different publications so we're not duplicating our efforts, we're saving on postage, and we'll be able to provide a lot more human interest stories, stories about our unique community history, stories about cultural arts happenings and things that are happening in our community that people really want to hear about and know about. I think this is really about communicating with our public about what we're doing and why, providing some points of community pride and hope for the future. I think more informed stakeholders around our community will improve the perception of our community both internally and externally as a place to live and do business. Councilmember Olson.
Thank you. I wanted to ask one last question. One of the things you were so good at for the rebranding, which I think you did a fabulous job with that, and then so I was so glad to see you recontracted. So I'm sorry you had to go through what you had to go through to get to them, but I'm glad you landed back on them. One of the things that you did so well was to get citizen input on various things for us to be able to make that change. And I know you're planning on that with this too. Can you just enlighten us what some of those things might be to get an idea from all the different ages and walks of life to help communicate better?
Yeah, I think, again, that's sort of a tenet of what we do and how we believe, we could come and sit at this table and say, well, this is how everybody else does it, so obviously it's going to work here, and it's just not true. So I believe every piece that we work on, there's a feedback mechanism. You were talking about how do we move this magazine to an online form and make sure we're not just shoving information down people's throats, but actually listening to, what do you want to hear? What's of interest? We're a big believer in metrics, and in communications that's hard, but, let's take a look at our Facebook page and what's trending and what are people interested in. And when we have events, where are people showing up and what's most common? Even after events, it's always a good opportunity to have some sort of interactive component with your city organization. And whether that's just ask your council member something and it's literally a question box, or it's an initiative we're working on and we want their feedback. I think that's everything we do has some sort of feedback mechanism built in. I think, and I get a little geeky, so forgive me. So I too love your brand. You better. And one of my favorite things about your brand is the bottom line, and it's that lively, connected community. And I believe it's so very true. And that connection piece is what we want to build on. It's not just about throwing out information. It's actually making those connections for folks so that they have an opportunity to engage and connect with you as their representatives. And that's sort of what this whole crazy show is all about, right? Is how do we connect with those residents and keep them informed. So, we'll be looking for ways to bring that brand into everything that we produce. And that might be as we look at, I'll give a tangible example because I know that was kind of fluffy, as we look at what is this next event, what is this signature event that we're going to do. Maybe there's an article we can put in the Citizen that asks, what are we missing? We have a holiday event, we have July 4th. What's the one thing we're missing here that you guys really want to see? And it might be around arts, it might be around your parks. We all know everybody loves your parks. We're going to have to find out. So I think that more than specifically, we're going to put this on Facebook and have this postcard and have this mailing campaign, I would just say that, we believed in that brand and we still do, and I think you'll see it as we go throughout all of these different deliverables.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barentine.
Just one more quick question. I mean, I'm glad we brought up Cahoots and the problem, and I'm not slamming them. Maybe it wasn't a good fit. And you guys have worked with the city before, so it's a little bit more of a level of comfort on how that's going to go. But I want to make sure I still have some reservation about it is a different type of project, and I would like to have some kind of feedback on how this is going and where we're at in a fairly short period of time, so that if we are running into some concerns or problems, there may be, for whatever reasons that happened with them, there might be, no matter how small, some legitimacy to some concerns or glitches that they were having. And of course, we're not going to hear that from this end of it. But I mean, there may have, not to bemoan anything, but they may have had something that legitimately was causing them some problems. If that's the case, I want to make sure that in a timely manner we're coming back and revisiting this, so that if there are those issues, that we can take care of them and not have the same end result.
Sure. And move through them, right? Let's have the conversation and figure out
right.
how to be productive and get through it.
Right.
I think Kristen shared that schedule at the beginning of the year, and we were putting it together, and we thought they're never going to invite us back, because I believe we have us visiting with you every day, every month through May. And I think that's an opportunity for us to pull up those work plans again and say, here's where we are. Here's where we need your feedback. This is an opportunity, not only feedback on the project, but feedback on the process.
But remember, part of the complaint was that there was too much communication maybe with staff too. So we were hearing a couple of different things. So as long as you guys are getting together to kind of have that, that there was too much talking going on and that caused a problem. So, as long as you should know, obviously, being a professional company, you would obviously be very interested in what happened with the previous company, where they fell short, what's going on. And I'm sure you're covering those bases, and I want to as well, so that we don't end up with the same result.
I can comment on that. That was one of the main concerns, was the professionalism that we require was not being conducted in those staff meetings. And so staff was coming to us saying, Murphy Cahoots is wasting our time. They're meeting with us, and they're telling us how we need them, they don't need us, all that kind of stuff, when they're not talking to us about the projects. With that said, I don't see Slate doing that, but I will be watching carefully, because best believe I don't want to have to come before you again and say that this has happened. I believe that we have really worked hard on this project. I also believe that we have put things in place now, and we all will be on the same page when we enter into this. And I want to make sure we're on the same page, because if we're not, then there's a problem. And so I think as we continue this, even after the contract's executed, I will be getting constant updates, probably every day from Allison and every other day from Slate. And then we want to make sure that we get to you all very, very quickly and timely every time.
Please make sure you don't communicate with them so much that they fire us. Okay. Don't go overboard. Okay. But I appreciate that we're starting out on that understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, as former city staff members, we understand that a lot of city staff, they're beyond capacity. So we're going to try to take a lot of ease off their workload as well. That's kind of why we're here. We're here to help you guys communicate and make sure that they can kind of concentrate on what they're doing, and we can help them kind of continue. And as well as we do reporting, we do analytics and metrics, so we are able to talk about what we are doing when we're out there, and we do have numbers to show.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you for bringing this forward. This is really exciting, and I think your background of being former staff at cities is really going to help benefit how we all work together. And I had a question as it relates to printing and distribution. We're still working through figuring out what that might cost, right? Because it depends a lot on sponsorships,
right.
How many pages, all the stuff. So we're still working on that.
Right. So it's probably important to say that printing costs are not in that scope, or not in the total. And we, I hate to say, we don't know, but until we have a sense. Oh, Allison does know. She's like, I knew this question was coming.
So we got a very quick quote from the printing publishing that we use for the Citizen newsletter. We said 48 pages. They do it in 8-page segments. 48 pages. Glossy pages would, for the same number that we do of the Citizen, would be about $5,000 for printing.
Per edition.
Yeah. So per issue.
That's a great price. I just have to say.
But I will add, even though that's a great price,
will probably be more than that.
One of the pieces of the conversation I had is that we get the best price, and making sure that we use sponsorships and all of that. So I think when it comes time to printing and getting all that, not putting the cart before the horse, well, I really appreciate Allison doing that. I want to be able to come to you all and say, here's what we got. Here are the quotes. This is what we got for the printing costs. Matter of fact, we don't even have to pay for it because they got so many sponsorships.
No pressure. Yeah, right. Great, thank you for that. I just have one more question. I love seeing analytics on things like this. So how soon do you think we'd be able to see something after the first edition, or in the midsummer after the first event, or what do you anticipate as far as metrics and analytics?
So I think there's two answers to that. I think one is, communication, I feel like, is measured in increments and then collectively, right? So the increments is what you're talking about now. Are we getting people to events, right? Are we looking at event numbers? Are we getting people to download our electronic version of the Citizen? So I think once we have the actual tools in place, we can give you numbers pretty quickly thereafter. I think more importantly, equally as important is the comprehensive effect that this is having, right? That's the whole reason you're doing this. And we can talk about the best and most cost-efficient way to do that. I know you guys do a citizen survey. That's a great place. That's how we know people were reading the Citizen to begin with. So we'll want to keep an eye on those numbers. And we actually, if the city manager lets us, we might want to add some communications that are specific to some questions that are specific to communications or just perception in general. And that helps us more comprehensively say, this is the impact we have on moving the needle. And so I think both metrics are important. The tools we can measure a little bit more quickly after we launch. The other ones take time, right? You're not going to launch a Citizen and be like, oh my gosh, now everybody's informed, and we did, Whew. So, both sets I think are.
Yeah, so electronic will be almost immediate, and then we're going to do the more antiquated version with print stuff. So when we go to pick up to see what's left, then we can kind of measure how much was actually distributed in the print. So we'll do it the way most magazines and newspapers do it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think the postage saving alone will probably compensate for a lot of that additional cost that we're talking about on the printing issues. I did want to speak just a little bit about the events, this signature event and kind of brainstorming for ideas. Serendipitously, we actually interviewed, I think, 3 individuals who would be invaluable in your efforts in trying to define what that looks like. One of them is a local business owner who is considering starting a Last Friday along South Broadway. One of them is involved with a group in Baker that does special events in Baker. Another is involved with a group who I believe does events in Rhino. And so we've got residents and business owners here in the community who are already thinking about this. And so I wonder if maybe a good first step, and if we can all kind of maybe agree, is to bring some of those people into the fold for a brainstorming session so that you guys can get an idea from some of these people who are already kind of stakeholders in the community about what they think might be a good idea, and then come back to us and help us sort of define what that is and what that looks like, because that might give you a good start. Councilmember Barentine?
I agree with Mayor Jefferson. I mean, I know he's met with a lot more of the businesses than I have, but to hear some of these conversations that he's having and some of the stuff that they did with ACE, I think there was an ACE member that's hearing the interviews that they're doing with some of the businesses and bringing that information in, and they have some amazing ideas and things that they've done before. And I know, well, he knows, the mayor knows more about the details of that, but some really interesting, very low cost things that the city could only support and wouldn't even be an effect on us monetarily, financially, so that they're willing to do that. I agree. You've got some excellent talent in this community that we just got done with our boards and commissions, and I think that's a wonderful idea to bring some of that in.
Any other thoughts
Not
on
that
that?
don't hire or
Everybody
steal
good
any
with-
of our
is
citizens.
everybody okay with that?
How many interviews have been done so far by ACE? Do you know how many interviews have been done by ACE so far?
That's a good question. It's ongoing, and so in between our meetings, I'm never really sure exactly, but I would say dozens.
Yeah, 25 to 30.
Yeah. Any other?
Data already.
Numbers talk, they've done
Yes,
quite a
we
few.
do have some data. Again, it's an unscientific approach to gathering feedback, but it's still an effective mechanism, I think.
Seems to me like if there was a lot more yet to do, that we could shift into asking you a question for, they could add a question in for the next ones.
There you go.
Adam,
Communications related.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're already going to do them, so.
That's right. Any other questions or comments regarding the communication plan generally? I'd like to move on to the State of the City event. Obviously, we heard a lot of concerns and questions about what was happening with the State of the City event. The first time I heard some of that feedback at the following meeting, I tried to give what I thought was 100% disclosure about, what are my ideas in the State of the City and what have we done so far. And honestly, in my opinion, I felt like I'd had the exact opposite opinion or effect of what I was hoping for. I was hoping to show you guys that this is an idea and that nothing has really happened on this and that we're open to your guys' feedback on what should be happening. And so, hopefully, we can have some of that discussion tonight. I guess at this point, I would like to turn it over maybe to Eric for some comments regarding, history of where we've been on this idea, what we've done, together, and maybe your recommendations, if you have any, on this issue.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. This isn't a new topic. As a matter of fact, when former Mayor Randy Penn was here, it's been my experience in other cities. I said, why are you not doing a State of the City event? Because I don't believe there was one during his tenure. And so when Mayor Jefferson came on and did discuss this as part of one of his thoughts and ideas during the council goal-setting session, it's something that I believe very strongly in. I think it's important that the council enunciate what their goals are, what's being worked on, and kind of have a celebration of what's been able to be accomplished, and also discuss where we're trying to go as a council and as a community forward into the future. And so I have supported this and still would recommend that if the council can coalesce and come together and determine the best way and means of moving forward, I think it's something that's worthwhile doing. I wouldn't have invested as much time that I had with Mayor Jefferson on trying to get this particular concept going. I do believe that we've come together just with some brainstorming, basically, of what an event like that could or should look like, who should attend, what's the target audience, what's the target message that we're really trying to convey, because we're really trying to talk to a number of different parties. Not only are we trying to talk to our citizens and our current businesses, but we're also talking to prospective citizens and prospective businesses that aren't here yet, and people that may wish to make an investment in our community. And so, we began to put those types of things together. Obviously encouraged the mayor to speak with the rest of the council, and he's had a few opportunities to do that. But, now that we're here today, again, I believe very strongly that an event like this should happen. And again, I'm not sure, kind of rattled over the last few weeks' events around this, but we certainly do feel from a staff perspective that some event that, again, enunciates success and challenges and how we're going to address things going forward should be done. And I think that the outline that the mayor has put together is pretty strong, talking again about communicating better, points of pride and hope for our future, because we have a bright future. There's a lot of very positive things going on that I think get clouded and missed by the general public because we're not communicating that effectively. And we're happy to have Slate come on because they have that experience in helping to tell that story and that narrative in any of a number of different ways, not only just a magazine, but at our special events, and how can we communicate with our residents and businesses at special events. Because some of the feedback that I've received from at least one of the ACE members who's been doing a lot of business visits in Chad, I forget his last name, not Chad Kanoth, but the other Chad. I should know. He works for a software company, but he's saying that the business people are saying we need this fluffy piece that you communicate doesn't tell us anything from a business perspective. It's great for residents, but it doesn't help me as a business owner and business. So that's part of this message too with the State of the City that we want to convey to those folks as well, and just thank them for their investment, because as we all know, because of Tabor and Gallagher, they're paying a lot of money to be here in our city, and we want to honor that and as well to acknowledge their investment here. So that's kind of what I wanted to say from a historical perspective, and again, from my perspective going forward, I would hope that the City Council would be in agreement to having an event. I do believe that there needs to be some dialogue amongst council about what that looks like, how the message is delivered, but I don't disagree from my experience too now of working in 4 different states. State of the Cities come in any a different flavor, but most of those particular messages are delivered by a mayor or a very small select group of council folks to give that message, and I would hope that we would be able to come to an agreement on how that could be done. And I've seen some pretty innovative involvement as well from different councils where the mayor gives a message, but there's a video with council people talking quickly in snippets about, hey, I'm passionate about, Lorette's passionate about chickens. She can do a chicken segment. You know, it can be any of a number of different things. Amy loves cultural arts. Yeah, so stuff like that. And I think that we could maybe come together and agree to do something that would be helpful.
Great. And so, you know, obviously I heard some sensitivities around this issue, and so I guess the first question I want to ask this council is now the appropriate time to discuss ideas and issues surrounding this, or do we want to have this conversation another day? Councilmember Barentine.
I think it had been, I don't think I ever had a problem with it from the beginning, but what I think when somebody goes, I'm getting married, it could be in a cathedral, it could be at the Justice of the Peace, it could be in a backyard, it could be at, I mean, so everybody has their own interpretation of what that is. And mostly I was looking forward to, once I saw that it was part of this communication piece, is to see exactly what that looked like for you guys doing it. We just recently got information from NLC that gave an article was in there about state of the city, so they have a little bit different take on how they do that. They obviously believe it's a very important piece, as you shared, to do. But I think that it was, you know, whether it's just a little stand-up soapbox speech or whether it's an event kind of thing is just something that I'd love to hear from you guys on what you believe, that what would we be spending with that $5,000? How do you guys view that? Have you done events like this other places, and what you think the value of it would be, aside from you getting $5,000?
I would say, first and foremost, I agree with the city manager. State of the City events are a really wonderful opportunity to tell an authentic story. Sometimes because we're trying to be concise and we're trying to be quick, it's hard to get into this is where we are, this is the challenges that we have, and here's how we'd like you to engage in moving the community forward. And so I think it's a nice opportunity and a nice narrative. Now, in terms of how it works, you know, the very first thing we would ask of this group is, what are you trying to accomplish? And then we can structure the event around that. And whether you are trying to increase awareness or of city issues, and so it's more informational, that's one approach. There's an approach where it's more engaging. You want it to be, I don't advocate for a town hall, but more town hall style, where there's a back and forth. Is it, you know, really about celebrating the community itself? In which case, you know, council, bless you, this is a sick group. So I think there's a lot of different approaches we can take based on where your priorities are. I'm going to just quickly give a few examples. State of the City in Fort Collins was traditionally the mayor and the city manager up in front of a group of people. Depending on the year, it was town hall style, or it was an address delivered without interaction, and we had videos from all of the different council members so that they could speak their minds and talk about the things they were most proud of. Douglas County, different. They had all three commissioners, I believe, up on stage at the same time, also speaking to their issues. So for them, it was more of a collective event. I think Lone Tree, a great example is they took even a different approach and partnered with their Chamber of Commerce. So it's a maybe more business-focused event where you have sort of a bit of a built-in attendee base too. Some of those are not private events, but invitation events. Others are open to the public. Others are both. And I think before I can say this is the best approach, you know, that's for this group to decide. And what I can do is tell you what I've seen work in other communities and why I think that's worked, and what has fallen flat in other communities and why that has happened too.
Just a quick follow-up question. I think from what the city manager expressed was some frustration that it hasn't been being done, and wanting to get the ball rolling and get this going. And we have been hearing about it in some form or another probably for the last 8 months. And I realize, but the timeline to do this, then I think when it kind of moved over, might have been a little different for everybody. But I do appreciate that. I mean, I don't think that the city manager was trying to rush this or do anything. I think it was just trying to get something going so that we at least had the event and did something so that we had that beginning. So I do appreciate that. I know that probably the foundation that you thought was already laid for it might have changed in your opinion of what the wedding was going to look like. So, but I do appreciate that it might have changed a little. But I'm not sure what the timeline usually is. Is that something that they usually do at the beginning of the year? Does it look funky if we do it in the middle of the year? Is it still doable? I don't think February is a good timeline anymore for this. That might be a little rushed. I mean, I think there was an understanding, rightfully so, both for the mayor and for the city manager. And if that's changed, that's changed. We go a different direction. But I don't think it's going to happen in February. So does it look funky to have a State of the City in June or at the 4th of July thing, or how does that look?
Lone Tree historically does their State of the City in May. And we always look back, half a year. Yeah. Right? Yeah, there you go. So I don't think it looks odd at all to do in the middle of the year.
Thank you. Councilmember Rolson.
Thanks for your ideas on this. I just want to make sure that we're all clear that I don't think any of us were ever against having a State of the City. And you knew that too, right? Sure. It was really about the process that was going on. That's all it was. And I don't think, at least from my perspective, I'll speak for myself, I don't care if you're the speaker at it either. It was just that you had already picked a date. You had already planned a number of things. You had even been told by the city manager and perhaps the deputy or assistant to come to us a little sooner than you had been along the way of planning, and apparently said, I don't need to. I can do this. So I want to just say that when we start to plan things as one of 7, that's where we get into trouble. That's all this is about for me. And I think a better set of ideas of what the event should look like could come from many of us, including the business community, including neighborhoods. I brought it up to the Chamber of Commerce last week. What would be the best way to do a State of the City event? They found our panels that we've done in the past. What were the name of those things? The summits that we did. They found when we had a really wonderful speaker who gave them lots of data and plans and strategies to move forward with was the most helpful one we did. So knowing that from that community is really helpful. Another community might want something different. So finding out who is our target audience and discussing that together about from who we're hearing from, to me, is very, very important in this, and that was left out of the process from my perspective. So that's why I raised it. It was not to create a big problem. It was to get it on the table and start talking about it. And I really thought that we would be doing this once our comp plan was approved, and our comp plan has been kicked down the road again. So I would prefer not to do this until that is clear and we can speak to that. Otherwise, if we're in contention over that still by May, I'm not sure we should be doing a State of the City, because State of the City isn't really very good if we can't come up with a comp plan.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
Yeah, I'll echo what some of the other council members mentioned, just that, I would like to be involved in this process a little more. First, my first question was back to what you mentioned is what's our goal of this? What do we want to get out of it? Because that's going to help shape all the other decisions we make. Do we have interaction? Do we not? Is it more business focused? Is it more citizen focused? So my questions were mostly around the goal we're trying to get out of it and kind of what the logistics around that look like. So I don't know. I think this is a good time to start talking about it. Councilmember Olson brings up a good point about the comp plan. I hadn't thought of that before. And I'm happy to know that it won't be weird if we have it a little bit later. That makes me feel better too. So yeah, and thanks for sharing your feedback on how other cities have done it. I know every city is unique, and as are we. And so I think we need to come up with something that is uniquely us. And since we haven't really done this before, I think it's really important that we get it right the first time. And it'll help set the stage for us when we do it in future years.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates.
I think we've voiced a lot of our concerns about what's happened in the past, and I think everybody's listening. So let's kind of concentrate on where we're going. I'm in full agreement that we need to do a State of the City. I think it's a good way of promoting our city and giving a feel. It needs to be planned out very well. Needs input from all of council. Just as a thought, I think a video that goes along with this, kind of showing the accomplishments of our city, would be a good thing to have. And potentially we put this video together, it gets posted on the website, but the State of the City address to the community, if we're having a public event, it can be delivered by the mayor. But the State of the City is to roll out our State of the City video, and then we can have a little bit more conversation about that. That way we can go ahead and have some legs with the whole event year round instead of just over, one event.
Thank you. I did think, the concept of videoing it so that it had more shelf life has kind of always been part of the plan, I would assume. But I appreciate the concept of including council members in this video that could be played at the event. They incorporate all of our ideas and concepts and messages. So I love that idea. So
yeah, just for folks that are interested in seeing a video, I would recommend maybe just go to like Colorado Springs, State of the City. It's not real extravagant, but it talks about their infrastructure. It talks about a lot of different things. And frankly, for people who are interested in coming to our community to do business or to move, they're going to be checking out our website. They're not going to be coming to the State of the City event. So this can give the structure that we need for the event and give it legs.
I appreciate those comments. Other comments or ideas? Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
I too am supportive of the State of the City address. I'm 100% agreeing with Ms. Barentine. If I'm expecting peanuts and popcorn, but it's a full 12-course meal, it's just don't know what to expect. So I think that was the shock for me. Is maybe some of us just didn't know the extent of what this was going on, or even what scope it was with our communications. But I'm in support of it. I'm in support of anything that makes sure that our constituents know what's going on and informs them and engages them. And, sometimes we like their answers, sometimes we don't. Sometimes they like our answers, sometimes they don't. So, but it's I think once we have community engagement, if this helps bring that, my only concern is the cost versus, I'm still unclear on how extravagant this thing is, and maybe you can tell me how from a big party to a band with drinks to, or just a simple meeting with cookies and coffee. I'm still not sure. So if you could kind of clarify that would help.
In all fairness, I think that goes to my original question that I don't think got answered. What was the original 5,000 going to do when you had the idea before of where we were on board?
Our 5,000 in that was a do not exceed 5,000.
Okay.
And so for us, we were sort of coming into an environment where there might have been some progress made on event planning, but we weren't quite sure. And so I think from our perspective, we were thinking how's this for descriptive? Nice, but not extravagant, classy event.
Better than peanuts.
Yeah.
But not as good as 12.
They were the nice peanuts, is what they were. They were fancy. They were maybe a cashew in there every once in a while.
Free food coming in from...
Right. There was not, exactly. No
I'm sorry.
people
Did
in
you
like
hear that
tuxedos.
question? Hold on a second. Why don't you ask that question again?
Not food coming in from 10 different restaurants all over.
I think our perception was if that was going to happen, that would be a partnership piece, right? So that would be an event where perhaps that's a community engagement standpoint, right? But we would not be paying for a full course meal from 10 different restaurants to support that. So we saw that $5,000 very much so as support. How could we help with some script writing? How could we fill the gaps for logistics? How could we fill the gaps that hadn't already took place as it is? I agree, it's hard. I think this is a personal philosophy. I think a State of the City should be a nice event because you do want to show that respect to your community. And it shouldn't be extravagant because nobody wants you to spend money on an excessive amount of money on just telling them on an event that can, nobody wants you to spend that kind of money on that. So I think, again, this is where I think our in-house perspective is helpful. How can we work with partners to make our funds go furthest? How can we continue to be respectful of community and put on a nice event, but also find ways to make it affordable? I think the video piece is nice. I will say video can get expensive. But there's cheap ways to do it, right? And maybe there's some partnership there. So I think as we look at all these pieces, I think it's smart to say, where's the ROI on that? If you're going to invest in a video, absolutely, as long as it's just not for one day, right? If we're getting some legs out of it that go beyond a one-day event and we're sharing that video through different online media and whatnot, then that expense makes a whole lot more sense all of a sudden. The event itself, we always say that should be leveraged both on social media, and you should, if you can, film it, stream it, and get it out there for the people who couldn't make it there that day themselves. So I think that there's a way to stretch the budget, but I also want to be really honest about your goals will determine your logistics, and your logistics will determine your budget. And until those goals and logistics are figured out, I'd feel uncomfortable saying this is what you can get for that money.
Councilmember Yates, did you have something else?
Oh, no, sorry.
Back to Councilmember Olson.
I would like to make a suggestion that, at least from my perspective, I'd like it to be really interactive. I think we need a keynote, obviously. If it's a mayor or somebody else, I'm fine with that. But I'd love to see it, and I don't know if the rest want to make it the most interactive that we can make it without being crazy, where it's just like not worth going because you didn't, too much going on. And I would love to see you come back with 2 or 3 ideas, different ways to look at it, and then let's talk some more. I don't know if others feel that way. Maybe you don't want it interactive. I really just don't want to go sit and listen to somebody and then go home. I think it would be better for our community on our first time to try and engage people with one another. I think the boards and commissions celebration that we do in August or whenever we do that every year, I got some feedback after the last one we did where it was everybody getting up again and telling what their committee did, that they found that incredibly boring on one hand because they didn't have enough time then interact again. And the time before, all we did is have them say who they were and something about themselves and something they loved about Englewood, and that seemed to engage conversation somehow. I don't know what we did with that. You should help us with that event because it might be kind of fun to look at. So I think there's something there that people want to interact with each other and meet someone that's from across in another district, another area that they would not normally get together with, unless we've decided this is for the business community, which is a whole other group. So we need to make that decision here as well, is who is it that we're inviting to this?
Councilmember Barentine.
The first part of her thing that she was talking about, and then she answered for all of us and said it was 3 different other things. But the first part that she said, that you guys bring about like 3 ideas, and maybe we could get some things that we could look at so that we get a little bit better idea aside from just the NLC. That I agree with. The rest of it, I don't know if it's just for the business community or not until we decide on what those other 3 things. So if we get some examples of what it could look like, then I think that's the best way to go for right now. Then we get a better idea. We all understand the wedding we're paying for and have that conversation.
I'm going to suggest that, given tonight's comments, that this remain as part of the original agreement, that we bring it forward, and that relatively quickly, within a few weeks or maybe a month, that we meet back with Slate, and that Slate give us some recommendations on date possibilities, and given some of the feedback that we've heard here, as well as perhaps some additional feedback you could get offline. Is that a reasonable way to proceed?
I prefer not to. I prefer to separate them out.
Hang on. I'm asking the staff, if you don't mind.
I think it depends on what the council would like, sir. I think we can go on whatever you all would like. But to use Councilmember Barentine's analogy, if this is a wedding, you all are the bride. So I need the bride to tell me exactly what you want in your wedding.
You got 7 bridezillas. Don't even.
Yeah. We need to know exactly what you want in your wedding, what kind of food you want, what kind of decorations, and we'll make it happen.
Well, and I guess that's the question, though, is, do we want consensus? Do we want to consensus on each of those items? Do we need to decide as a group and get consensus on what's for dinner that night? Or, you know what I mean? I guess how far down this rabbit hole do we want to go? And maybe we can get a recommendation on how to move this forward. And Mr. Keck?
Yeah, Mayor, I was just going to enunciate that, not dissimilar to maybe not go with a bride analogy.
Bridezilla, I like that analogy.
But you can pick out the dress.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. One of the concerns that I have, and I think staff shares this as well, is that what we do not want to have happen is if you roll this back into one agreement, that it becomes unraveled at the time of approval again by council, because there are so many things that we want to move forward with. The magazine and the brand, tagline, all that stuff notwithstanding, we have a number of other projects that we're relying on Slate to assist us with, including design elements of banners and things like that for the 3400 block of Broadway. I don't want to see those things hung up because we have a capital project slated for that would, no pun intended, that we plan for that may become derailed or pushed off, and we need to be able to move forward adequately.
Sure,
and
I don't want to see that derailed at all. My
Yeah.
suggestion would be that the contract would come forward with a TBD date on the state of the city, and that we would work through that. And again, my thought is, to have them come back, relatively soon to say, here's what we think it looks like, and then we can have a more meaningful conversation once they've given us some structure to that conversation. Here's what we think the guest list should look like. Here's what we think this should look like. And then we can start as a group to know what we're talking about a little bit more and get into the weeds a little bit more and decide how much consensus we need to have on each of these issues. But I think if you put it in a written format that just says, here's who we're thinking for guests, and then we can take them one by one and kind of go through that process and say, do we like that? Do we not like that? Councilmember Barentine.
Well, I think we did the same time as that.
Go ahead.
Just, Linda brought up a suggestion, and I agreed with her, and I don't think that anybody disagreed that they wanted the State of the City address.
Sure.
So I don't see the problem with leaving it in the contract and then agreeing on a not to exceed the $5,000 on what that looks like. But nobody has made a statement that they didn't want it. So I don't think that that's the problem. It's just what it's going to look like. And since we're not tied to a February date, thank God for you, and that it doesn't look funky to have it at other times, that I liked Councilmember Olson's suggestion of bringing some ideas back to the table and let us decide, but leaving it in the contract.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
I think we should
I'm
also
sorry.
start I think we should discuss amongst ourselves what the goal is. I mean, what are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to, just brag about ourselves and let the community know what we're doing? Are we trying to attract residents? Are we trying to, reach out to the business community? Is it a combination? And I think if we have some more internal discussions about that, that will help guide our other decisions in who's going to be invited? Is it going to be a Q&A? Those kind of things. And then I feel like we need to do our part to help, what we think would be good and not rely 100% on Slate for this. Of course, they're experts, but we need to figure out what we want to get out of it. I think at least if we can figure that out, that would help lead us down a path where they can help us be more successful.
I think that's a great point. I mean, we need to get involved and engage. I guess I'm concerned, though, that, if we make this the topic of our study sessions or regular sessions moving forward, that this is going to eat up a lot of our time. And so I was thinking, do you have any ideas on the structure of how they can gather that feedback? I guess my thought was we would give our feedback in kind of a laundry list at this point, and perhaps maybe we can have, if this is all right, I'm going to suggest that perhaps there could be a one-on-one with a couple of the members who have specific issues or specific ideas that they could share with Slate, so that Slate can be the gatherer of those as a third-party expert, rather than me as the mayor or Eric as the city manager. Is that a reasonable way, do you think, to proceed, Councilmember Martinez?
Well, I emailed some questions already. I don't know if anyone else shared questions, so I think
you're the only ones we got, but do we have some answers? I don't know.
It was just questions I had.
And I want to thank you for those. I was very careful, though, to make sure I didn't start the process with them before we have an executed contract. And so I just want you guys to know we took in your questions and took them into our hearts. But we did not want to share with them or even talk with them about what a concept might be or whatever, because I wanted to make sure we didn't move without an executed contract.
So post the contract execution, then would that be an acceptable time to share those questions? If you feel like you need guidance on what the concerns are, then you can contact some individual members individually and come back to us with a little bit of a thought on what your recommendation is on how we can move forward. And then we can tell you, hey, we love X, Y, and Z, but we don't like A or B or C or whatever it might be. Is that a reasonable way to proceed here?
I think for us, absolutely. Again, we get to be the flexible ones in this process. So as long as that feels comfortable for staff and council, then we absolutely can have those conversations and try to consolidate and synthesize all of that feedback into some options. That's perfectly within our capabilities. Again, if staff and council are comfortable with that process, we are too.
I apologize. I lost the order of operations. Councilmember Russell, I believe, was next. I apologize if I'm out of order here. Does anybody... Councilmember Russell.
Go ahead. I've been up for a while, but I really...
apologize.
Oh, no.
Councilmember,
Go
let's
ahead,
move on
because
to
I'm...
Councilmember Wilson. I apologize.
No, listen.
Let's go on to move Councilmember
I mean,
Wilson.
I think after I misspoke,
I
and
apologize.
I just
Yes,
put it up
Councilmember
because
Wilson,
I was
yes.
afraid to... I heard at the beginning that you thought you should decouple. We should decouple them. And so here's my reason. I agree with that. And I'm sure this will not be famous amongst you all, but I'm not sure 5,000 will cover it. So that's what I'm concerned about. And so I would prefer to see what we're coming up with and make sure that we can cover it and to the extent that we want it. I mean, I've done lots of events like this before, and I know, I mean, that's $5,000 to pay you to do it, or that's the whole event could cost that? Is that both? That was for everything here, and but based on what?
So that was the administrative cost to Slate. Whatever it would cost for the food and the champagne and the fireworks and
is in
Secret
addition
Service,
to the 5,000.
Is in addition to the 5,000.
Okay, so that's what I had also thought. So I wanted to make sure everyone else knew that. We're not just talking about a cap of 5,000 for the event. We're talking about their administrative help to make it happen. Okay. So I would prefer that we decouple them so we can sort that out and determine to what level do we want to go on this kind of an event. I don't have trouble going above 5,000 for this. It's not what I'm questioning at all. And the second piece of it is we don't have our comp plan done. I'd like to make sure we have that. And it might not be that May is the best time. Maybe this contract with you goes through to a full year, or is it to the end of this year? And so what if it happens that the best time to do this is next February? What happens then?
That would be a different council.
But, it could be next spring, and it would be a great time. Comp plan would be done, everything else. You're still on. You'll still be on, because you have another 2 years after that. So, I don't know. So, I'm just thinking about possibilities. I don't want to back us into a tough place. Unlikely that we would do it that much later, but I would see us decouple them. But I might just be alone, which
Thank
is
you.
fine.
Councilmember Russell.
My one concern is, I did hear consensus tonight that everybody wants a state of the city. I am okay with separating it. What I'm not okay is making it a point of contention and that we end up not doing anything. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that the comp plan has to be done because we have a state of the city that's going on right now apart from the comp plan. I'm not saying that that's not important to get it done, but I don't think it's necessary to have it done in order to have a state of the city. I think that's all I have for right now.
Thank you. I think it was Councilmember Yates next, if I'm not mistaken. Councilmember Yates.
I've already stated that we should go ahead and do this. My concern is that we don't rush this, and we're talking about maybe even a fall event for the city to perform. Maybe that's the time to roll it out for the fall event. Maybe we combine it with something else, but we have that message ready to roll, and we promote that message. I just don't want us to do it for the sake of doing it. I want to make sure it's right and it serves its function. We get our money back.
Would you like to see it included in the contract that comes forward on February 6th or not?
If we're going to do it, I don't really necessarily think it's real important that we have it in the contract. Council's going to do it. Once we figure it out, then we can be talking with Slate about, or whomever, about what is it going to take to get it done. But we need to come up with some ideas of what we're going to do before we put it in a contract. I think that's kind of getting the cart in front of the horse.
Mayor Pro Tem Gillett. Oh, apologize. Councilmember Barrington.
My reasoning for wanting to decouple it is somewhat similar to Councilmember Olson's, is that I want to get this part done and let us worry about the second part on our own timing. But I agree with City Manager. Let's move one part forward, and I think we have consensus to move forward with the state of the city. But let's have some time to discuss what that is while we're not holding up theirs, because I know it. Dealing with contracts, they can't be nebulous. We need to make sure they know exactly what they are. So I prefer that we separate them out, yet them knowing that that is in discussion and they would be in the queue for that. So that's where I prefer. I want to get Part A done.
Councilmember Barrington.
I share your frustration in this. I don't think you wanted to decouple it for any other reason than the actions that council has taken surrounding this issue, and it has become somewhat of a political piece of this for whatever symbolism that it has. There is, like any other town hall that any of the council members can have, there's nothing that stops the mayor from giving a speech, which is more of your NLC style State of the City address, which apparently would cost me nothing. Maybe I'd have to buy you lunch. I don't know. So that type of piece that I've seen in several of them wouldn't cost anything, and that doesn't need to be part of the contract. Like Councilmember Russell said, I hate to see this become some kind of little political thing to kick around. I don't think $5,000 is that big of a deal to have into this contract, to go ahead and make, to move forward with it. But nothing stops the mayor or Councilmember Russell or myself or the Mayor Pro Tem from going ahead and having their town hall or a business meeting, or doing it at like hopefully you already do represent us at so many different events, and having that piece, which is already part of the talking points that you do, as does our city manager. I would prefer, as a show of just some solidarity and some sanity, this is only $5,000. We don't even know if we're going to spend it, to at least leave it in there and stop playing these games with us and just move forward with it. And if we do it, we do it. And if we don't, we don't. But I would prefer we kept it in there and stop. It's just kind of seeming to end up being a little petty. We haven't had one. I understand your frustration with that. You wished it had happened before. I don't care what level it happens at, as long as we do start doing some things that are proactive that way. And if it's small, and we move forward.
Before I move on to other members who want to comment on this.
And the other thing would be, obviously, I agree with Councilmember Russell. The comp plan has, as a matter of fact, the fact that we have delayed the comp plan is all the more need for a State of the City to say, here are some of the issues and the reasons that got sent back. You have the historical piece of it, the density piece of it, some other issues that the council changed, so that there's more of communication on exactly why that piece is so important, and that it is a procedural piece that it had to go back. I think that communication makes it more important to have the State of the City addresses, so that people know that we're paying attention to it, that it matters to us, and we're moving forward.
Before I move on to some of the other council members' comments or questions here, I have heard 3 members in support of removing it and doing it in a separate contract. I've heard 3 members suggest they'd like to see it continue as part of the contract. Councilmember Martinez, could you help us gain a consensus on this one way or another?
Really, to me, it does. I want to do it. To me, it doesn't really matter if it's in this as a TBD or separate. And correct me if I'm wrong. If we take it out, we can add it in as an addendum at any time, right? So there's nothing holding that up. I don't want this piece of it to hold up any of the stuff we already have planned for February, because those are under the gun deadlines. We need to start like yesterday. So I hate to not really be a good deal breaker on this, but to me, it doesn't matter if we keep it in or out. I think we're going to do it. I want it to be really successful. I want people to come, and I want it to be great.
I think our possibilities remain more open by putting it in than leaving it out.
Crazy. Let's just put it in.
Okay, thank you. We do have consensus to leave it in, and thank you. You are officially off the hook. You are officially off the hook. Councilmember Yates. We're moving on to Councilmember Yates.
No, I'm sorry.
No problem. Councilmember Barrington.
I'm sorry. Just put it in the contract. Let's just go and just get it done.
I don't think anybody's trying to make it political.
No, not at all.
Well, good then.
Not at all.
Thank you. Sounds like we have consensus on this. Hallelujah. Any final comments or questions on this? With that, I will thank our guests from Slate very much.
Thank you.
And you said we were all sick here?
Just meant the sneezing.
At this time, I would like to take about a 5-minute recess, and we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes.
Well, they remember how the torment was of just doing a logo, so
They came back
That's
after
right.
that.
they still came.
They still came back.
Thank you.
Really? Nice. Very good. I know they have a brand new recorder.
We were passing ships in the night. She came on board and I left. We actually emailed each other, but we never met in person.
Oh my God. Yeah. And those were both okay. Okay. Oh, Tom, I think you're going to be a good resource for us, I have a feeling. Thank you. Great. Great. Very good.
Yeah, I think like a lot of old journalists, she probably misses journalism.
Yeah, she has such strong relationships in Montreal.
Yeah. Oh, I
Like
know.
she really held those relationships tight and really did a great job representing the city. And she had very fair and honest stories.
Yeah. Oh,
it was easy to work with her.
Yeah, I edited most of her stuff. And I found her a delight to work with. I'm really glad we stayed friends. So often, when you don't work with somebody anymore, it's like, well, we'll stay in touch.
Oh, wait, I thought I told you, we're done.
Oh, nobody's still there? No, we're still in touch. So, but anyway, I just
Yes, I changed their,
Tell her I said hello next time you see her.
they kicked us out.
Oh, really?
We were done. They kicked us out at the last one. We had everything done. And the lab, about some Democrats appointed to the board who were that are anti-charter. And we lost the...
I didn't know that. I don't think anybody else did that I know of.
Yeah, no, we were done. We had a contract with we had everything ready, and it was like at the last minute. Thank you. See you. Hey, Eric, are you going tomorrow?
Tomorrow is
Breakfast time. Make Murphy go with me. Maybe you don't know.
Yeah, find out. Yeah, he's got to be back though by 9:30 because we have a department director meeting. I looked at it. I'm like, man, this looks awesome.
I went to one a couple years ago.
Yeah, some of the same speakers I've just recently heard. Like in December, I heard from. I'm missing the University of Colorado.
Well, it's going to be interesting to go with our Vector Bank representative.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get her to just even talk to me. Like, and she just said, no. So now I'm going to have her for breakfast.
Yeah, there you go. Just work her over at the table.
That's what I'm going to do, because when I was on the chamber, I tried to get her to engage, and she was part of the chamber, and she just quit showing up. And I baked there purposely.
Yeah.
Vector Bank.
Vectra.
What's her name, Joylene?
She's not on anymore.
No, she quit. Yeah. Okay. You know, my son, he's VP of Chase now. He's involved in everything.
You gotta be.
He's in everything.
Yeah.
He shows up and he finds more opportunity.
And what people's responsibility.
And
And I'm encouraging people to one person. Oh, I'm talking about what and
She got her on.
Oh, yeah.
one of my employees.
Makes sense.
Hi, Tom.
One is if I have work, I'll take my trash.
I'll let you know as soon as I know.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm like a bad penny. I keep coming back.
That's okay. I don't mind at all.
Occasionally,
And I took my.
Yeah. No.
When I don't have.
No, I don't like that either.
Throw it in there.
3 weeks from today, 3 weeks from today, I'll be in Nicaragua.
Wow.
What's going with you? We have a party of about 15. In the main school.
Thank you.
You're the main
So
school
sweet.
and part of the group is going to
Yes.
the community building.
He said he was
They
going
got
up. I
half
asked him
finished
to
it.
grab one.
The other, whoever was doing it either ran out of money or ran out of time to do it. How long are you going to be there? Well, that's a nice thing you guys are doing. And we're going to deliver baseball.
Here's my desktop.
Baseball.
That's your desktop.
Yeah.
No money.
I just took a picture.
Did the,
No, I need some help.
What we try to take down 10 to 12.
She is a American Bull Terrier.
It doesn't do baseballs. It doesn't use baseballs.
Talking about a dog, she sees a
This
kid
time
that's
we're
like,
adding one new thing. We went to a high school game and nobody had helmets. So we're adding 3 batting helmets. That's important. I'm taking that. There was one. It was cracked, and when the team was in the field, it was a catcher's helmet. And the kid was little, and he had to wear 3 baseball caps so that it would fit. So it wouldn't fall off his head. Enjoy that trip. You fly, I guess, right? We'll go into Managua, then we go about 120 miles north.
moderator or whatever.
The one project we did, the community building, was 11 miles from the hot air water.
You don't call it that.
Yeah, it's a real.
I've gotten a bunch of emails that are kind of nasty about me just mentioning, telling a little story about my mom.
Well, I don't know what the Englewood Herald's going to do without that.
I've had probably 6 or 7 emails saying how wrong that was for meetings.
When I was
It was despicable.
and my replacement wasn't going to get there in time for me to train him. So I offered to extend it. No, you go home on time. He said, you know the definition of the indispensable person? That's me. You stick your arm in a bucket of water, pull out your arm and leave the hole. You're indispensable. Otherwise, somebody can use you.
Exactly. I downloaded this. I feel like I'm in a war zone. But they've got some new body armor that's really super lightweight.
Yeah, I'd like to try some. It's stuff we want.
Maybe look at yours first. Maybe I've got a weird copy or something.
No, actually, now that I look at it,
I didn't think about it till just now. I'm sorry. I should have mentioned it earlier today.
Ernie is not my friend. Anytime in the afternoon.
Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, I mean, we did.
School knows me.
I want to explain how
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I don't have the business meeting. It's not business.
Don't have the business meeting.
Business isn't ready for the 6th.
We went from sport to
Doing all right.
they're great results with them, and there's some bad.
Okay, if I could get everybody to take their seats, we're going to get started in about 1 minute.
It's not a one size
That's what's hard about it.
All right. You need more tissues?
No, I still have tissues. If I run out, I'll point to you.
There's a box.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Like you're really in a tunnel.
Oh, it is.
Oh,
I had a headache this morning, too. I have one a little bit now. It's not as bad as...
Okay, folks, I'd like to
Oh, I don't want to go to the hospital. That's a worse place.
I'd like to call this meeting back to order, everyone. Please take your seats. We're going to be moving on to agenda item 5. That is our police building project status update. This is an informational item. Our Finance and Administrative Services Director, Kathleen Wrinkle, is present to update council regarding the Englewood Police Headquarters building replacement project. I understand Mr. Keck would like to kick this item off. Mr. Keck.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, we've been moving forward with the design for the new police building here in Englewood. One of the things that you've seen me involved pretty deeply on the front end of this particular project, but as city manager, as tempting as it is to want to go manage another construction project, and I really love construction. I've built a lot of buildings in my career, but I can't be your city manager and your project manager at the same time. So this evening, Mr. Henderson is here. Mr. Henderson's well qualified. He has a construction management background too, and he's going to be the city's project manager that will now work with CBRE. So I'll let Mr. Henderson and Ms. Wrinkle talk a little bit about the project from two different prongs. Number one, we want to make sure that we keep the council appraised upon where the project is from a financial perspective and what steps and involvement the council will have. And then not dissimilarly, we'll have Mr. Henderson talk about the construction, both the design and contractor piece, and how they will be selected through the help of CBRE and when that will come back to the council for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Wrinkle?
Thank you. So what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about the financing, which is going to follow very closely with the workplace strategy efforts that Mr. Henderson will talk about here shortly with the construction. But we want to get to a point where we know how much money it is we need before we actually dive into putting all the documents and so forth together. We've been working with our financial advisor, PFM, as well as Stiefel Nicholas, which we hired as our underwriter. And attached in your documentation is kind of a very high preliminary type schedule based on kind of a early to mid-March time frame where we'll have the information we need. Now, that's preliminary. That could slide a little bit or even pull up a little bit depending on the schedule that Mr. Henderson and CBRE work with. So we'll be keeping close tabs on that and following appropriately. A couple of the dates I'd like to point out is where the information crosses council's desks, and that would be on April 10th, where we have a study session to present the cost estimates and financing plan. We'll have our financial advisor here to speak to that at that point. Another touch point is on April 17th, where we'll be putting the first reading of a parameters ordinance together. Now, that parameters ordinance will give us a range where we can sell the bond. and that's based on your approval. The reason we need the range is because the market may fluctuate. So we want to make sure that we can catch it somewhere in that fluctuation. And then on May 1st, we're looking for the, hopefully, the approval on second reading for the same ordinance. Those would be the touch points. The other major dates I'd like to point out is we will have rating agency presentations. That's typically staff with the rating agencies telling the rating agencies all about the city, where we stand financially, what we're looking forward to, where we've been, how stable we are. And based on that, we'll get ratings. And then the pre-closing and closing actual sale of the bonds, we're looking at the beginning or first week of June, full week of June. So with that, that's kind of the high level of where we are. We're keeping close eyes on things. And Dave, I'll turn it over to you to speak to the construction.
Well, we're moving as quickly as we can. As you know, we approved the CBRE contract last Monday night, and they are our owner's rep. And last Friday, we had our kickoff meeting with them. So I'm really looking forward to working with them and delivering a real quality project. It's going to incorporate all of the elements that the voters approved in the ballot issue, and some of those they're really basic, but our existing facility doesn't have them. That's modern records and evidence space, secured area for victim that's separated from those that are arrested, modern internet and computers, locker rooms and training equipment, and more holding cells and secured parking. Those were the major items listed in the ballot issue. We'll make sure they're all in there. Our owner's rep, CBRE, will begin the first step of the project is their workspace analysis. That's going to start next week. There'll be a kickoff with the police department. I believe it's Monday. They'll spend a couple of hours with some key staff over there, and then they'll get in depth with the space utilization study. That's going to take 2 to 3 months. And at the end of that 2 to 3 months, they'll be able to deliver a document to the design professionals, the architect that we'll select and you all will approve, that'll really guide the design of the facility. This is going to involve almost every police officer and all the employees of the police department. And I think that this week we are assembling all the existing documents for them, the drawings of the building, any geotechnical information, all the background, and a new survey of the site. And so we'll deliver that by Friday. So we're going to keep you all posted on a regular basis. We're real early in this process. Concurrent with this workspace study, CBRE will be preparing RFPs to select both a design and construction contractor for the job. So we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have now.
Thank you. Questions from council? Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Have there been any preliminary discussions? I know that we're talking about keeping it up near the same site. Have we made any further discussions about vacating that street, or where are we at with the land and what we're thinking? Or I know that some of us were interested in that. That was a discussion before, but I haven't heard any update on that. Could you kind of let us know?
I can tell you we discussed it with CBRE, the potential for vacating Laddie Street, which it would add another 60 feet to the site. We don't know if we need to do that yet. And until we get into a little bit of the design, we're not sure. It is an option. The council would have to approve the vacation of the public right-of-way. It would change some traffic patterns in the area, but we've always felt that that's doable. And we may need the space. If you ask me now, I would say we probably need the space, but until we have something scientific to base that on, I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councilmember Rolson.
I just have a question about the week of the 17th, and then the 1st. On the discuss rating presentation, is that you all will be discussing it and then you're presenting it to us at the regular meeting, or are you expecting us to do, because that's a first reading.
It's basically, like, we will discuss it and then present it to the study session.
Okay. Well, there is no study session usually before that. So we did talk about having study sessions more often. Just make sure that we get that on our calendar if we're doing one. Am I right in seeing it that way?
That is correct.
That's how it was expected?
Yeah.
Okay.
As needed.
Other questions or comments? Appreciate the update and keeping council informed on this very important project for our entire community. I'm going to move on then with no further comments or questions then to agenda item number 6, that is the Park and Rec Master Plan. Parks and Recreation and Library Services Director Dorothy Hargrove is present to discuss the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. Good evening, Director Hargrove.
And I'd like to invite Dave Lee, our Open Space Manager,
Please.
to join me.
Welcome,
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
He knows our parks.
He sure does.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thanks for having us here to talk about the master plan. It's been a year-long process, as you know. I would also like to say that Joe Sack, our Recreation Services Manager, this has really been his baby. He's worked really hard on this, and he was unable to join us tonight and sends his regrets. Family issues intervened. I would start, I hope you all had a chance to look at and read the draft master plan that was sent to you and has been posted on the website and made available to the community in a variety of formats or venues. Throughout this process, we have focused on citizen input. I could list, the master plan actually does list the community meetings, the surveys, the letters we've sent out, the emails we've received and solicited. It's many different forums when we've reached out to people in a variety of ages, a variety of interests, so that the plan you see before you, I feel very confident, reflects what the community wants to see in their parks and recreation facilities in the future. The plan, I think, does a very good job of saying where we are. There's a lot of analysis in terms of national standards and park data, but it also does a very good job of saying where we need to be in a decade or more. What is the path forward? Tonight, I'd like to focus on the key recommendations of the plan instead of going into all the details. And can someone tell me how this works? That way? Yep. Hooray! Yeah, you got it. So, and please interrupt at any time with questions. I think that's easier than waiting till the end of the presentation. The first of our key recommendations is that our focus needs to be the renovation of our current park and recreation facilities. Our current facilities are older. Not that there's anything wrong with age, but they're reflecting the high demand and the high usage that our citizens give. We have, for too long, postponed important maintenance and capital improvements due to a lack of funds. There's a lot of work that needs to be done across the board. Our top priorities for renovations would be Cushing Park, Miller Field, Jason Park, Little Dry Creek Greenway, improvements at the Englewood Rec Center, and phased improvements at Pirates Cove. The reason that those are chosen, again, I could go into lots of detail, but basically it's based on the demand, on the changing neighborhoods around these parks, which are changing the way people use them, and the overall impact to the community. The improvements at the Englewood Recreation Center would focus on making the facility more accessible for people with disabilities. We need updated locker rooms, both for safety and functionality, and there are pool improvements that we need to make at the rec center to make sure that that facility stays safe and up to date. The Pirates Cove feasibility study, which was sent to you under separate cover, pointed out if we wanted to add major features or expand the park, that would involve a significant capital input. Our recommendation is that we do the phased improvements in order to keep that facility fresh in the market and, of course, safe, because that's always a top priority. We may not be able to build and expand a dream park, but we can continue to make it a very special place for people to go. Another one, yes?
Can I ask on the feasibility study for Pirates Cove, did Did they look at whether or not we could make it an enterprise organization where it funds itself rather than using the funds in the general fund?
We did a financial analysis of the capital that it would take to make these improvements, and the payback for those based on having to finance it would not be sufficient for the fund or for Pirates Cove to completely cover all of its own costs. The estimates of increased demand and increased attendance, even with increased pricing, there was a limit to what that could go. So the idea of making it a completely separate enterprise fund did not look feasible with this study.
Okay, thank you.
Another key recommendation is that we need to talk about our dog parks. There is no question that our residents highly value these dog-free, the off-leash dog parks, as well as our designated dog park at Canine Corral. But because Englewood is the only city in Colorado that allows dog owners to let dogs off-leash in specific urban parks at designated times, we have created demand across the metro area. And the additional visitors that come to our off-leash dog parks are helping to create issues of safety and access for multiple users at, what did I do?
Focus. It's out of focus.
Okay, Sam, there you go. See, every time you talk about dogs, something goes wrong.
But Sam helps us make it
Right,
clear.
there you go. Thank you. The plan itself does not recommend a solution because the solution will involve even more community input, specific recommendations, making sure that we meet the demands and requests of our residents and still make these parks accessible and safe to the people who live in our community. So expect to hear more of this conversation, and the Parks and Rec Commission has been put on notice that they will be involved in this process. I don't have any other details about what that would look like, but we will address the issue.
Dorothy, do you know what park this is that you have up there?
Jason Park.
That's Jason? Okay.
Right. And it's just showing you all the rules that we have there and the
It's just got green grass. I thought that's not the dog park.
No, that's not Canine
Well,
Corral.
quick question actually on that issue with the grass. Is the solution then to fence specific areas that would allow for dog use, and what is the likelihood that those areas would remain green through that use? I think one of the major, pluses to the dog-friendly areas is that it still is able to maintain grass. What are your thoughts on that?
If Dave could address that, he is my dog expert.
I'm your grass expert.
Yeah.
I think if you look at any of our parks, they're fairly small. And when you look at fencing a certain area off, you will not be able to maintain the grass in it. I mean, as it is, I believe Jason somewhere around 8 acres. And it takes a toll with the dogs now, particularly in the wintertime when the grass cannot regenerate. And so we work pretty hard to keep that whole area as beautiful as we can. But to fence a smaller area, it probably wouldn't be feasible to keep grass.
And that is the solution. What is the solution then? Is it fencing or not fencing?
I think it just depends on your point of view, whether you're a dog owner.
Yeah. I guess, again, I'll just throw that out there, as a potential issue because I know that the reason why our dog parks are so highly utilized is because they're not like other dog parks that are fenced and have dirt and, are filled with wood chips or something of that nature. This is an area that's much more beautiful and appreciated.
Yes.
A dog set for somebody who does the state park allows you to bring your dogs in. It's just mostly that they're paid. And Denver does have some parks that do allow you to bring them in, including some places on South Suburban as well, some facilities that you can for their fields. I think the contention with some of this with the green area is that we're not the only. I mean, other people pay to maintain that, don't they? Does the soccer association still pay
something for that field, and the T-ball people still pay something for that field where they actually have functions where it actually has to be green? I mean, my dog will pee in dirt. He doesn't actually need grass to pee, but for the other functions that they do there, I thought there were other players that were bringing money in, that were maintaining those fields.
They don't necessarily maintain. They paid to play games there.
Right, okay.
That's not a recovery necessarily that pays for itself to maintain a field. Okay. It's just a fee. It's a pretty nominal
So that was
fee.
pretty instrumental in closing like Bates down to off-leash, was because of the soccer activity that was going on, and that's where I heard that the kind of money that they were paying, and I guess that meant just to play, use the field to play then, that they weren't actually... Because I got the impression at the time that they were paying something to actually maintain that field.
No, I don't believe that's correct. And really what closed Bates Logan down was a neighbor over there who was very vocal.
I saw the over 200 people. I was on council before then. I remember those nights. But, I mean, there were more than one. There were more. People had pop-up things of the entire neighborhood to scale. It was pretty intense. So I remember... there was more than one person, but I was
we do have a
wondering,
nonprofit in Englewood Unleashed who does help maintain the parks and raise some funds.
What I was just asking was whether there was actually money that came in that they maintained it, because that's what I remembered, or whether it was just the fee they paid, and you answered that piece. That's fine.
The fee is mostly to take care of the ball field preparation and some of the equipment and striping the fields and getting it ready for the games, that sort of thing.
So having it off leash has created an additional expense for us to try to maintain it green, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
To maintain it to the standard that the communities need. It'll be a good discussion. Another key recommendation is to enhance our recreational services and make sure that they are meeting the needs of a changing community. As you may remember from some of our earlier conversations, the SD scorecard process is essentially a diagnostic tool to help us figure out whether the classes and services that we are providing are priced right, that they are the most important things that we should be providing, considering what other private organizations or other governmental organizations are able to provide. And over the next several years, I mean, in perpetuity, I think we will be using this sort of analysis to provide a little finer tune to the programs and services that we're offering the community at all of our facilities. Another recommendation is to stay aware of the need that we could create new parks for our existing and future residents. I mean, from a national standards, we are under-parked. That is, we have fewer acres than would be normally considered adequate for our population. So we need to take advantage of opportunities as they arise in our landlocked community. It's important that we collaborate and be open to collaborate and partner with developers, with schools, with landowners. But we should always be aware that if we are able to acquire new lands, that we need to ensure long-term funding for maintenance and repair. Steve, I think.
Is the reason that we're underparked, is it because other areas, let's say you go south of us, when those areas were developing, there was green belts and all of that was required. And we're an older community, and that just was not a part of the planning. Is that the reason, or is there something else?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's not that we've been selling city land willy-nilly over the last few years. I mean, it did have to do with the development of the city and the history of it. We're not selling any property. Never mind.
We were a huge park. Come on, the history of all of this, we made very definite plans to make sure that when the Tuileries went and Cinderella City went in, it was very planned to have neighborhood parks. If we're increasing the density, and that's bringing that piece down, but I'll not throw our founding fathers under the. But they did a beautiful job. We had most of the city was a park before. So in order to plan that piece out, I think District 3 got a little shafted on them. I mean,
And I would.
We didn't get as much as we should have, but because we did partner with the school, and part of the only park there was actually part of the school. But I think there was some significant planning on that piece.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that no one ever thought about it, but
Yeah.
national standards have also changed. I mean, newer developments have a larger proportion.
Yeah.
But you've pointed out a very, very good point. We have those orange dots are what we call park deserts, where people are more than a half a mile away from a park, so it's hard to walk there with a baby stroller or take your child on a tricycle. So paying extra attention to those areas, if I can't predict the future, but if land were to become available or landowners wanted to work with the city, those would be areas to focus on. Absolutely.
Dorothy,
I'm sorry.
one thing, in somewhere there was a chart in here that said Englewood has more park space than a lot of the surrounding communities like Aurora and I forget what all of them
And we
were.
have more parks, just not more acreage.
Right, okay. And
Depends on which standard.
the one thing that I'm concerned about is financing this, and I see all over that developers need to pay for it. Council has been in the habit of waiving park in lieu fees, and we have got to get this piece straightened out, or we have to stop density because we don't have the money to do this. And so that was my concern when I was reading a lot of this. I think it's great plans, but the bottom line is, do we have the money to do it?
Funny you should say that. The final recommendation is that we have that very conversation. We need to identify long-term financing both for maintenance, repair, capital projects, and any possible land acquisitions.
I would like to respond to that too, because when I was looking at that part of it, it bugs me when I read that Englewood is undertaxed. We pay such low taxes that we want our taxes raised. I'm telling you, in a couple of weeks, people are going to be getting a tax bill, and they're going to be shocked. And we're talking about new things in here, and we have got to cut expenses somehow, because it's going to put a burden on especially the older population, of being able to afford it.
I would point out the plan is very agnostic. It does not say we need to raise taxes, but identifying, what funds in the city, how much can the city afford for this? What are the top priorities? I mean, very, very legitimate questions. There are lots of different funding mechanisms, not just property tax increases for the citizens. As you pointed out, working with developers, our developer fees may be something that we want to consider. We could work with partnerships with other agencies or other cities. I think there's some creative solutions to this problem, but I think we have to acknowledge that maintaining the resources that we have will take some of that creative conversation. But definitely
Mr.
not.
Keck might have a comment or two.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I echo the concerns brought forward by Councilmember Russell. And towards that effort, actually, I've obtained some proposals for impact fees. We've talked about these before. We need to start moving on this before additional and major development transpires to help try to capture that. The horse has obviously left the barn for the most part, but we still have an ability to collect impact fees that would help parks, would help law enforcement, help streets to hit critical infrastructure that's necessary and needed due to this new growth.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
If you guys don't mind, though, that's not the subject of what we're dealing
No,
with
I
here,
mean,
so let's
before
not
we
go
do
too far
anything
down
else,
that
I
rabbit
would
hole,
agree
please.
with that. Get consensus quick.
Thank you. Please, Ms. Hargrove.
No. So our next steps with this master plan is to get your comments and suggestions, and I appreciate your questions. And we can finalize this plan and bring it to council for official approval, and then Dave and Joe and I and the team can get to work to implement what we can if you approve of those priorities and the key recommendations that we have brought forward to you. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you. Councilmember Wilson?
I just wanted to thank you, Dorothy, for pulling this all together and say that I sit on the Parks and Rec for liaison. Not that I've been there a lot recently because we had to pull me out last week, but I think that you have done a really great job in getting lots and lots of input into this. This is this has a high-level vision to it. There's no easy answer on how to pay for it, but I appreciate the comprehensive nature of this. And I appreciate the folks that served on the board to give lots of input. One night that was 3 to 4 hours long. Which you conveniently were busy that night or something. But it was a great meeting actually because I think it was helpful. Everybody got lots of input and there were
Are you
tough
saying
questions.
that I dominate the conversation?
No. You never do. You never do. But for some reason that night, a lot of things came out and I thought it was very, very helpful.
The Parks and Rec Commission
I just
has
want to
been
say
very
I thought the process was excellent. And I appreciate the way that you've led it through, so much information to put it together.
Thank you, and I'll pass that on to staff too. Let them know that you appreciate their work.
Councilmember Martinez, did you have something?
Yeah. Thank you for putting this together, and I appreciate how much public input you got on this. I was really interested to see that map of the park deserts. That was really interesting to me because I picture our community, full of parks. Everyone's able to walk to a park quickly, but that was really telling to me. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the pocket parks and how that is that good enough to fit into some of those places? Would that benefit the community enough, or you think those areas really would benefit more from?
You mean our current pocket parks, or the idea of adding additional?
The idea of adding additional ones.
If we could add pocket parks in those park desert areas, I think that would be a plus. The residents highly value the green space, and so you're asking the wrong person, but any green space is better than less green space. Do you have an opinion about them? I mean, maintenance does get to be an issue.
That's what I was going to bring up, is the maintenance. Because they're such smaller areas, the cost of the maintenance goes up because you're not in a big consolidated area. You're going from one tiny area to the next. So they do have an advantage. I agree with Dorothy on the islands, the deserts out there. I think they have a place there, but just to add pocket parks, there's a limited amount of what you can do with them or in them.
And also the maintenance.
Thank you for your efforts in bringing this forward. I know it's been sort of a long time coming. I'm a little bit surprised just to hear, that we were underparked. I guess we're so blessed as a region that, I feel like, that we do have those amenities around us, at least nearby. Obviously it's great to see an update to the Parks Master Plan. I believe this is our first recreational master plan ever, correct? So it's really great to see us thinking about those concepts, parks specifically, as well as recreational opportunities, I think are so important for the quality of life indications that people are looking for when they're deciding where to live. So thank you for that effort. And I do, want us to think a little bit more about this dog issue. Honestly, I feel like that's my little bit of a pet peeve, perhaps, with what's proposed here, because again, I just feel like that's, that was intentional, I guess. I don't know. But
Well,
I think that could take away at what I feel like some people view as a major amenity. You know what I mean? But
Well,
it's a
I would
process.
stress that the plan is really pretty straightforward. That we do not want to take away that amenity, but there may be some changes of rules or times or some way that we can massage it so that some of these conflicts, which were voiced quite clearly by the community, could be addressed. But it does not recommend that we're going to change what the community values about their.
It does recommend fencing small areas, though, correct, or no?
No, that was one option,
Okay.
but not a recommendation.
So the recommendation is let us hash it out.
Pretty much.
And, unfortunately, it seems like dogs really bring out the public, so we'll have perhaps a robust conversation regarding off-leash issues. Councilmember Yates.
I know at an earlier meeting, the subject of off-leash dogs in parks, non-fenced parks, there was a brief statement that there might be some additional training that's required for the animals, along with some permit for it, for that activity. Is that something that's still potentially on the table, or?
It would be a recommendation that we would move forward. I mean, not a recommendation. It would be a possible solution. How's that?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But definitely not a decision to do that, because that would depend, is that too much of an impact? Is it a burden on our citizens? Would it solve the problem that we're hoping to solve? But it is one idea that was brought forward we thought worth mentioning in the plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was modeled after Boulder. They do a similar project. That's why it was brought up.
Thank you. Councilmember Rolson?
Oh, no, sorry, I'm done.
Thanks for bringing that up. I'd forgotten about that piece of it. I do think that that's a way we could work with the fact that we are the only city in the area to start to take some kind of fee for those who don't live in the city who come in and use it since they don't pay, to have something for them to do. I think it could be useful. I don't know how you'd enforce it. I think that's the hard thing about it. So I wouldn't want to burden our code enforcement or police in any way with this. So if there could be something figured out by that would be great.
Thank you. Any final comments or questions from anyone? Seeing none, I'll thank you both for presenting this. We'll look forward to seeing that come forward when?
Probably on the 21st of February.
Thank you.
That would be the next available time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
We're going to move on to agenda item number 7. That's our PIO update for informational purposes. Our communications manager, Allison Carney, is present to give us an update.
Good evening again. I'll be very brief. I'll just go through this list, and I can email it to you also tomorrow. Most of these things you may have already received emails from us about. Monday, January 30th, the Englewood Historic Preservation is giving a lecture. Strong Sisters Elected Women in Colorado, and that's at 2 different times, 2:30 and 6:30. 2:30 at the Englewood Library downstairs, and 6:30 at Brew on Broadway. On Wednesday, February 8th, here in this room at 7 p.m., Englewood, Littleton, Excel, and Colorado State University Extension is holding a free home energy efficiency workshop in this room. That's at 7 p.m. Thursday, February 9th at 9 a.m., the Economic Development Council of Colorado's Regional Economic Development Forum for Region 3, Arapahoe County and Douglas County will be at the Lone Tree Arts Center. That's basically all day. There is a registration fee for that. If you're interested in going, you can let us know. We could register you. On Friday, February 10th, again in this room, there's a breakfast meeting with the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce, their economic development group. I believe the mayor and Eric will be speaking at the opening of that right at 7:30. On Thursday, February 16th, at 7:30 a.m., First Bank is presenting What is the State of Our Community at Arapahoe Community College. On Thursday, February 23rd at 8 a.m., again in this room, we're having the Englewood Business Resource Kickoff with the Small Business Development Center.
I like the boss part too. That was awesome.
You got to change mine to that.
You know, in my night class, if a cell phone goes off, the person has to stand up and do a little song or a
we
poem.
may implement a similar policy moving forward, but not tonight. Not tonight. We'll let them off the hook tonight.
And last but not least, Thursday, February 23rd, Chick-fil-A will have their grand opening. The time has not yet been announced.
What date was that?
Thursday, the 23rd, February 23rd. Amy, Councilmember Martinez, will have the article in the what we think will be the last Citizen newsletter, which will be the March-April edition. The deadline is Friday, February 3rd.
I'm sorry, what was the event that Eric and I are speaking at prior to the ACC event that you mentioned?
Friday, February 10th, here in this room at 7:30.
I've got it in my calendar.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
You are going to send those out to us and post
Yeah, I can email tomorrow.
Thank you. Let's see. Moving on, I believe now we're on choice here. Anybody want to kick us off on choice? Sure, go ahead.
I wanted to thank the wastewater treatment plant staff. I meant to last week and didn't have an opportunity. My bad. I greatly apologize. I want to thank the wastewater treatment staff. They heard Rita and Councilmember Russell and my concern about the biogas study, the $60,000 that's being paid, and were kind enough, even though that got passed for the study, to reach out and offer to answer the questions. Councilmember Doug Clark from Littleton attended, 2X Martin Marietta, who happens to be an engineer as well, 2X Martin Marietta engineers attended, Councilmember Russell and I, and the city manager was there along with the staff, and they did a beautiful job of explaining what the situation was about, what not only the cost to go ahead and convert it, how long it would take to do that, but exactly how they intended to pay for this, and kind of explain this whole commodity subsidy carbon trading stuff that was actually what was going to be subsidizing it, and had taken into account that if our new, as I put it, the new sheriff in town, which is actually our new president, and that the study will take 160 days. We'll know within the first 100 days what the EPA and the ecology piece of his 100 days going to be and whether that would be feasible, but they are going to take that into account in the study. But I greatly appreciate it. Nothing like sitting around a room with a bunch of geeky engineers all having a great time talking about the density of gas, and I was grateful for understanding a lot better about that process, so that when this study comes back, regardless of what they recommend, I will have a better understanding of exactly what's involved with this and whether we should move forward. But that was extremely professional of them. I greatly appreciate it. It was very informative, and I'm glad that we did that. So,
geeky or true subject matter experts?
Well,
I think is what
you have
meant to
nothing.
say.
It's like, hey, just like when accountants get together, we're all talking the same language, we're all just having fun. So, but they did it in a way that they really, really were able to help me to understand it at a level that made me believe that keeping my responsibilities and representing and being responsible stewardship over the finances on this. And it's a total different look. And I'm glad that the questions were asked. So it's not as much science as it is carbon credit commodity trading. So we will see what the study comes back with. But I wanted to say thank you to them. They were very hospitable and very professional in what they did. And that was all.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
Sure. I just want to start by talking about a little bit about what happened at the last meeting. It was very rough. It was very intense on all of us, and it was very difficult. And I talked to Mayor Jefferson today, and we talked about some things. I feel like he and I are in a better place as far as feedback, discussions, what could be better. And I am committed to doing whatever it takes to work together with this council to just come up with the best way that we can all work together. I know it's a very difficult situation, and I think this kind of situation deserves a lot of discussion from all of us. Just like with all the other decisions we make, we have to have difficult, uncomfortable conversations, and we have to kind of, walk through the mud to come about with the best solution for our city. And I think this is just another instance of we need to be open and talk to each other and kind of work through it together.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates?
I'd also like to talk a little bit about the subject. Joe and I spoke quite a bit about this issue, and we would like to see some resolve in this. There is, we talked about the things that have bothered me, and Joe and I kind of came to an action plan to help address those specific issues. I'm not really interested in making it all public on all of the issues. I think the important part is that we move forward and we fix the things that has brought us to this point. Joe made mention that part of the emotions that happened had to deal with basically the surprise for him. And I do want to say I understand that aspect. And in retrospect, maybe I should have had a little bit of a side talk saying that there was if things didn't change, that there was a possibility of this coming forward. So for that, I do apologize. I will also say that there was a lot of feelings that were, I'm going to get nailed for that word, feelings, but there was a lot of things said that, frankly, if I were in that shoe, I would apologize for the direct attacks. Now, walking out of the meeting, I understand. I understand why that happened. They wanted additional time to be able to discuss this issue, and that, like I say, I understand. As a council, we need to get away from the personal attacks, and it happens quite frequently. It's usually not at the same level that happened at that meeting, but those personal attacks it's caused a lot of issues. And the reason that this was brought forward was not just actions that has happened with our mayor. There has been other council members that have been consistently not following the process of how we conduct our meetings, that has created the frustration among council to the point that this has gotten that far. So, has it been fair to Joe that these actions have happened, and it's part of his responsibility to guide the meetings and to keep them in order? No, it hasn't been 100% fair on his part. There's a point in time where each council member needs to take responsibility for their own actions during these meetings and curb their actions. Stay on topic, keep it short, keep it concise. We're all adults here. We know the points. And when we get a no on whatever we're pushing for, we don't come back and just hammer it and hammer it and hammer it and hammer it and hammer it. Because that, frankly, falls into the lines of grandstanding. I also want to make the public aware of the fact that when I brought this forward, I did not take it lightly. I knew that there was going to be some fallout on this. But the problems that we've had have been serious enough that I was willing to go down that avenue. And I also realize that it may not go well for me, but my number one concern is this community. I want to see development in our community, not just for businesses, but I want to see people moving into our community with their families. We've had business leaders within the community that has watched our council over the past year, and there has been a couple of them. Let me back that up there. I know of one that has left the community because they just didn't trust what council's doing. And this is the public view we're talking about, and that's why I strongly believe that as a council we need to get our act together. I mean, we can disagree on stuff, but we need to have business-like meetings. We need to get away from the grandstanding. We need to quit tying different subjects into the topic that we're talking about. Our meetings go way too long because the process isn't handled. Can we still take care of the issues and cut down on the amount of grandstanding? Absolutely. And there is a certain point in time too that, if you don't understand something in the packet, the question is, and this is a recommendation and what I do, there's a time where you just simply call that director and say, hey, I don't understand this in the packet, and get a better understanding of what's going on instead of grilling staff from the dais. That's another thing that really helped push me towards doing this, is that we have times where council members they don't like what the public has to say, so they attack the public. They don't like what staff has to say, so they attack the staff. They don't like what another council member has to say, so they attack the council member. That's very poor form. We need to make this a lot more professional. And that was my motives for bringing this forward. I didn't want to bring it forward, but this subject needed to be addressed. And we needed to get some teeth into this conversation instead of, I know we need to do it. And I'm not saying that's what Joe said. I'm just saying that is a general attitude. There I go. That's enough. I've said enough.
Thank you for those comments, Councilmember Yates. Councilmember Rolson.
I would be glad to have a conversation further about this. I don't know if this is a time council requests or kind of an odd time. So if we're going to have a conversation about, and you're going to are you going to pull it out? We're going to have to vote one way or the other whether it's retracted or not. I would love to talk about it then. Otherwise, I don't have anything on council request right now.
Thank you. Just for clarity, would you be removing your motion then on February 6th, or do we want to continue to proceed with that?
I would like to have a little bit more discussion among council on this. All parties, not just one party. I don't necessarily see a vote happening on the 6th. And as long as we can behave, I'd be more than happy to pull it away.
I appreciate that. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
Thank you. This is it's been a difficult topic. I have had the nastiest, rudest emails from people that I respected that they're so far-fetched, and all these weird things. And I guess if you were looking for a show, you got it. And I guess I akin this to somewhat of, what? There are nobody that understands what this council goes through but than the 7 people sitting up here, and the stresses that we go on, and the time we put in, and the hours, and the love we have for our city. Listen, if we did this for pay, we're doing this for the wrong reason.
Amen to that.
And sometimes the community forgets that we were just people sitting at home just wanting to do something for our community. You may disagree. In fact, you have the right to disagree with our decisions. You do not have the right to be rude and hateful. That's just a line. And I think that's been the most disappointing for me, is just the vitriol and the nastiness of this. It gets carried away, and I can see how that happens. There's someone even here today. I said, I'd rather you just call me and talk to me and cuss me out or email me direct, rather than, the old email courage or the Facebook courage or the next door courage. But if you have an issue with any one of us, there's not one of us up here that I believe wouldn't just sit and talk with you one-on-one. Joe and I had a very difficult conversation last week. Knew we needed to reschedule the conversation, and we had that conversation. And there's a lot of hard things that the community doesn't see that's happening behind the scenes and in the background, and personalities that get upset, and things that are confusing to one that don't make sense. It's not as cut and simple as sometimes we make it appear very simple a lot of times. And sometimes it is, but other times it's difficult. And I say, as a person with a wife who sees these writings and family members up here who have, who care about their spouses, no spouse wants to see some of the stuff that was out this week, and it was shameful. You have the right to do it? Yes, you do. Should you do it? That's up to you. But I would ask, this council tried to have a retreat to get and kind of work some things out. Instead of the public giving us an opportunity to really discuss, somebody wanted to come and watch our discussion. Could they do that? Yes, they could. Should they have done that? I don't know. Because it wasn't very productive. And you really can't, there's still things and personalities that and I expressed to Jenny. Joe and I had a wonderful conversation. I appreciate the tenor and tone of our conversation today. But I said, what happened is indicative of something that's been boiling for a while that just needs to be taken care of. And that, we as council members need to agree on how we're going to respect one another. Because if we don't respect one another, the community won't respect us. And if we don't respect the community, it's just this whole ordeal. And it's been tough and it's been hard. But I'm as committed as I was 8 years ago to finish my term out and to serve my community with the best ability that I have. If you want to question why I do something, feel free to give me a call. I put my phone number out for everybody. I put my email out for everybody, and only one person even contacted me with a question. So, if you're going to have the courage to write a nasty thing that, spurs up all kinds of turmoil, you're really not helping the situation, and I think our community's better than that. When you see our council going through what we're doing, we're going through a hard time. We need your support. We don't need your, even though, again, I'm going to support you and say you have the right to do that. But I thought it was interesting that some comments were so bad, even the next door moderators had to take them off. So, that gets bad because they're very liberal on what they'll keep on there. But I want to thank this council for being willing to have discussions, work together. We had a lot of great things happening. I had a kind of conversation with the city manager not so long ago saying, we are doing some amazing things. We can't get blindsided by the stupidity and the personalities and the things that go on that keep us from really obtaining what we want to be as a wonderful city. And that's where I'm at, and that's what I'm committed to. I want to thank those who called me and had nice conversation, and there's a couple folks in here who called me and just really supported and encouraged to work through. Those are the things that mean something. If you want to help your council person out, just call them up and say, hey, I don't agree with you, but I support you. How can I help you get through? How can I help you get a message out? Or what is your message? And I think it'll be a lot better than what we've had. So that's where I'm at. I've said my piece. I would encourage Mr. Yates and last Friday, we should never leave a vote open. So we left a vote open that I was hoping that we could get closed out just because it was crazy up there. Well, what do we do? Well, let's finish. There was not 4 people pushing their buttons for that. So we have to finish that up. So that's business that's going to come up next week. Please, or the 6th, 2 weeks from now. We actually get a break from break from council next Monday. So, but we love serving you. So when you see that come up, we're not trying to cause issues. We just need to finish that out. So, Mr. Mayor, support moving forward and getting some great things done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell?
I'd just like to ask a question.
Yeah, I'll come back to you right after Councilmember Russell. Okay.
I just have some things to say also. This evening, I wish every meeting could be like this evening, where people have been treated with dignity and respect, and that doesn't always happen. And first of all, part of the reason that I stood up and left is because the law had been violated. There was a violation of the Open Meetings Act when 4 council members had daisy-chained or met together to decide. If it wasn't that, there shouldn't have been a motion. But you put a motion on the table, which is an indication that there was a daisy chain and already done. And that's why I stood up and left. I would like to address some of the things that Councilmember Yates, and I actually appreciate your apology. I do appreciate that. But I want to say that I have been appalled that you and Mayor Pro Tem Gillett have taken
Russell, I appreciate this is your time. I really trying to
All right.
keep us on a positive note, and I appreciate where you're trying to go and trying to.
Thank you. I'm done.
Councilmember Barentine.
To have all of these private conversations where certain council members are not done, to have gossip going around that there were deals being made and all of this kind of thing, was what the public, at least expressed to me, was part of their concern. When we have things happen, when it's very obvious that almost half of the council has no idea that it's going on, and that there hasn't been any communication, I find it kind of hypocritical from Councilmember Yates that we need more communication and we need more, and there's no communication to almost half of council here about the problems or an opportunity to resolve them, or even what the mayor said from the dais was, I just had conversations with all of you guys. You didn't tell me. And the arguing going back made it look like it was a little bit of a straw man argument. I disagree with you, and have publicly stated that I believe that the time with Greg Pyburn was very valuable. It was to me. But then I did the work he asked me to do. And if there is such a division that you all can't get past, whatever your feelings or your angst is, I am here for the issues. I will always question staff. I'll do what I believe is my job, and nothing's going to stop that. Nothing's going to stop me from working with you guys.
Councilmember Barentine, I think we've heard that we're past some of these issues, and I appreciate again these comments.
I think in all fairness, we had a lot of time from Councilmember Gillett, and we had a lot of time from Councilmember Yates on this issue, and I'm going to just finish my feelings.
I appreciate that, but I think both of their comments were geared towards trying to get us to work together. And I think we're at a really critical stage here. And I appreciate. Please continue. I just wanted to give you my thoughts.
Part of it is that it's geared toward, in my opinion, leaving this as an open issue. And because of the way it was handled last time, I have a bit of a trust issue. That leaving this issue open, and the reason that I got up and left, there was no notification to the public. They had no idea that this kind of thing was going on. There's a huge transparency issue with this. To make the comment now, as if there's some open motion floating out there, to go ahead and to make the comment that if things go well, that you'll pull this, is to hang this over the head of the mayor and make it difficult for us to function. I don't know how he can do that leadership.
I apologize to interject here, but I do think this is a really critical conversation that we make sure that goes correctly. I think I heard from Councilmember Yates that we're in a better spot right now, and that he's going to withdraw this motion on February 6th, as long as things continue on a positive path, and I feel comfortable with that.
I ask
so I appreciate you
I
trying
have
to
to
get
ask
clarity
the
here.
question.
Please.
According to Councilmember Yates,
Agreed.
and I am not comfortable in
I
leaving.
am comfortable.
I
trust Councilmember Yates will honor his word, and that we
I
will
wasn't
be able to
asking
move
what
forward
you
as
were
one. And I
comfortable
appreciate
with.
that. Again, I don't mean to interject, but again, please use some sensitivity here. We're in a difficult spot.
I think considering what happened, I'm being very sensitive.
Please, I appreciate it. Continue.
I feel that it's being left as if he's going to be judge and jury and then bring this up at any time he feels that you're not performing properly. I think that's a slippery slope for us.
I don't think Councilmember Yates wants to see what we saw at our last meeting, and I don't think anybody in this room wants to see what we saw at our last meeting. And so, again, I trust that Councilmember Yates will honor his word.
That's what I'm
asking.
I'm not so sure that that's the case, because it's being left in my opinion, hanging over your head. And I want either a definite answer that we're going to pull this and move on, because I'm willing to work with everybody. I didn't bring this motion. I didn't have a problem. And if people have a problem with what's going on, I would like some direct communication with me as well, which is not happening. So I want some kind of decision that we're committing to something and not just having this hang over your head because it hangs over the head of council.
I appreciate that. Councilmember Martinez, and I'll come back to you, Messenger Yates. I was last in the... Okay. I'll let Councilmember Yates perhaps respond then.
First thing I'd like to point out, this is a council of 7. One vote cannot make anything happen.
You do control the motion, though. I mean, you were the motion.
I do control the motion, and if it does come forward for a vote, everybody has a right to vote yes or no. Okay. So I just...
But what you're telling me right now is that we're in a better spot, and you'll
absolutely,
either remove the motion
absolutely.
or vote no at this time, right?
That comment was more for Councilmember Barentine to point out the fact that her statements are inflammatory, and they're designed, I shouldn't say designed, it comes across as trying to create turmoil. And that's the exact problem that we're having within council. This type of stuff. And that is exactly what has gotten us to this point today. You and I have had a conversation today. You know my intention.
I appreciate that.
So.
I appreciate that. Apologize, I'm losing track of the order here, but I'm going to go to Councilmember Olson.
Thank you. So I guess why I passed was because I thought this was council member time. Were we going to have a conversation about what happened last week? If that was the case, then I think it would have been good to say we're going to have a conversation about it. And I have a number of things to say about it, as you would probably expect. So since some things have been brought up, I do want to make a couple comments. One is our very first meeting as a council, if you don't remember, there was back chain conversations about removing people from the dais and letting the city council or letting the attorney go. I never had any. No one ever called me and talked to me about this at all. And I think someone else at least. So we started out on a bad foot as a council in some ways, but I think that continues to happen. I have heard from citizens. There are council members that meet with folks that come and present to us on a Monday night to help them write their little things towards us. I imagine it's true because of the people that said, well, they've been in those meetings. So there are things that are going on that I think we need to have an open-air conversation about that do impact the way we work together. Comments under breath, sighing from the dais when I say something or someone else is not helpful either. But we got to have an open conversation about this kind of stuff. For those of you that weren't at our consultant training, we never talked about those things. We never talked about some ways in which things came up over and over and we don't really address them. We had a big outbreak at the very beginning of that consultant meeting of someone accusing someone else on council of taping the evening, and then a phone thrown across the table to prove, no, it's not being taped. We never even talked about that happening that night when we were at the consultant. So I'm glad you found it really helpful. Some of the documents were helpful from that night, but actually helping us work through things in the moment, we never did it. I think we still need to have those conversations. I think you've had outbreaks with me many times. I had someone 2 weeks ago called me, said, are you okay? I heard the mayor yelling at you as you were walking down the stairs. Now the stairs vibrates and makes things louder, so it sounded like that. But I asked you many times to stop. Let's not have this conversation now. You kept wanting to have it. Those kinds of things happen over and over. We're not getting beyond it. It has to end. It's detrimental to our directors, it's detrimental to us. I mean, I'm embarrassed as well as Rick just turned to me and said, I'm embarrassed to be up here. I am too. I don't want to be like this. It brings out the worst in me. So are we going to have a conversation or is this the end of it? I mean, a withdrawn motion doesn't necessarily make anything go away. We have to commit to different things going forward. So we're going to have a conversation. When will that occur? And I'm glad to talk further then. I'm very willing to say I'm sorry when I've done something wrong. I think I've done that publicly many times. But I would like to say we're going to commit to some things going forward.
I don't know who are you asking?
I guess I'm asking this, because you decide how the meetings are going to be set. Are we going to have a conversation or are we just going to move on?
You know, I think this is an area that really can be picked up. We've already committed to a policy and procedures discussion, as a review of that policy and procedure with our new city attorney when Mrs. Brown joins us. And so in my mind, we can pick up some of these issues then. I'm open to some other ideas on when would be a more constructive time to pick up this conversation. Other comments? I apologize, I lost the order here. I think it's
going to be 5 or 6 months away. I would suggest we do it earlier than that. I mean, it sounded from some of the stuff that it might be a while, which I feel
I think
greatly
Mrs. Brown,
grieved over.
again, I hope, I know that we discussed at our last meeting that Mrs. Brown might be 5 months away. I'm really hoping that that's not the case. I'm expecting, more like a month, and so my intention is not to kick this issue down the road much further. So I agree with you. Thank you for those comments.
So go earlier if we find out
sure.
it's several months.
If she gets here, in my mind, this is a pretty high priority item for her to help us with. And again, we've all got to commit to that process and be willing to work with her and identify areas where we think we can improve. Do we want to limit debate and put ourselves on timers so we feel like there's no grandstanding issues? That's something that the 7 of us have to come with some consensus on some solutions on what type of policy and procedures do we want to put in place that we feel like are fair and can be applied maybe objectively to all of us, so we don't feel like there's any major issues there with as far as how much time you're getting or those type of issues.
I'd rather have trusting conversations across both without timing, but we have to decide we're going to do that. We have to make a commitment that we'll monitor ourselves and help each other do that when we're not.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm losing track of who's next. I think it's Councilmember Martinez, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I'll be pretty quick.
Thank you.
I echo a lot of what's been said up here, and I know this has been a struggle for us. And, in order for us to be our best council member selves, we need to work together, and we need to talk to each other, and we have to communicate. Disagreeing is great. We just need to do it in a respectful manner all the time. And back to what was said about our first meeting, it was my very first meeting on council. It was decided, that the city attorney was going to be fired. I didn't know anything about that, and I just said, I haven't heard of this before. This wasn't on the agenda. Right, but you chose to accept his resignation early that night when we were, as a council, like 30 minutes in. And so I just said, I don't know anything about this. I don't know any of the history. I'm going to vote no. So I voted no. And I think we started off on a really rocky start with that. Joe, you and I had talked after that. It kind of didn't go well, and I think that set the tone for a lot of our conversations. And I think, if anything, what happened the last meeting is kind of giving us a chance all to restart and realizing how serious this is, and that we all need to really commit to being our best selves and being respectful to each other all the time and working together so that we can get stuff done for the city, because that's why we're here.
Amen. Councilmember Russell.
I actually agree with that, and I do agree with other things that have been said. There have been things that have happened, and I just want to say there was history. The night that I asked if it was being taped, there was history. There was a reason that I asked that question. And so we do need to go to each other. Most of the time we don't. And one of the things that concerned me a little bit about what you were sharing, Steve, is I actually agree with that. What you said about if you didn't understand something, you would go to the director. However, 2 council members have been singled out. Apparently, me and Councilmember Barentine cannot go to talk to anybody because we're interfering with city business. And so is it okay for some council members to do it and others not to do it? That's problematic. And I think that, we need to agree to disagree. If when I make a statement, I don't want to cut off discussion because my constituents are watching what I say. And what I feel. And if we're limiting conversation, we're making decisions and silencing people. And I think that's problematic. I think we need to be open, and I think we need to agree to disagree because we don't always agree on everything.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
No.
Thank you.
Nothing
I just hope that if we're going to start the respect, let's start it now, so that we're not talking over each other and doing it. It just doesn't help. I do have a huge amount of respect for all of you. I think the conversations we have raised the boat, but there is a huge trust issue. I don't trust you. And what happened last week sure as heck didn't help.
Councilmember Yates.
I would like to answer Rita, Council Member Rita Russell's question. What is good for one council member is good for all. Talking with, and I haven't heard anything about you, Rita. I don't know where that came from the standpoint that you're not supposed to talk to council members. But
directors,
or excuse me, staff.
Staff members.
Sorry. It's when you talk when we, not you, we talk to a staff member or a director. A lot of it has to deal with how that is done. There is nothing wrong in the world to ask a question. There is problems, and I'm not saying this has happened, but there is problems when a staff member is giving direction on how something will be done by a council member. That is a problem. And that has happened very recently. So, if you want to make your opinion known to the employee, I think there definitely should be a disclaimer in there that this is my personal opinion and you are not obligated to follow it by any means. But if you do that, I think it's very important that our city manager is aware of these conversations. And I think there is a rule, and I could be wrong about this, but staff, when a council member goes and talks to a staff member, that they at least report the basic content of that conversation to Eric so he knows what's going on. I think if it's anything more than a question of like, what is this line in here and how does that go together? That I don't think you need to, call Eric. But if you're getting in depth about something with that staff member, I think it's in our best interest as a council member to at least drop a note, a text message, a phone call, just something, just let Eric know that you were in there. That way we keep misconceptions from happening.
Candidly, I really do think best practice is to start with Eric. If I have a question, I always start with Eric, and if Eric redirects me, then I go to that source. But I feel like the best place to start is with Eric. Usually, I get an off-the-cuff answer to my question, and I'm able to move on with my issue. And I feel like that way he's aware of where that, and it's kind of filtering through the city manager's office. I would suggest might be best practice.
I've often emailed him and the director, so they both know
there
my
you go.
question.
And that might be a policy.
Simultaneous, yeah. I like that as well. I think that's a good practice as well.
I'll admit that emailing might be an issue with me because I'm half the time I'm driving when these questions come up, and you don't want to email and drive at the same time.
Fair enough. I wanted to thank everyone around this table for the discussion tonight and all of the private conversations we had. We dealt with some tough issues, and I think we're in a much better spot right now, and I'm committed personally to working with every member of this council. And I would ask that my colleagues on council, the public, the city staff, use this as an opportunity to reset some of our relationships and trust levels and recommit to the public that we are going to do what's in the best interest of Englewood, and that is working together for the greater good. And so I truly hope that this can be used as that opportunity. Rhetoric does matter, whether it comes from us, whether it comes from the public. Words have meaning and influence, and so I really encourage my colleagues on council to try to keep that in mind as we move forward. I'd encourage the public as we move forward as one community on this issue to remember that on their Facebook posts, on their Nextdoor posts, other places, that we can use this as a positive launching point. Moving on to the rest of the city business, I would like to give
May I just say one
yes,
last
please,
thing?
Mr. Yates.
I know that there's the newspapers and stuff have deadlines. I will say that my intentions for the next meeting, because we are going to have to formalize this, will be to withdraw it. I pray and I ask all of council that we are on our best behavior. We have a community. The community is a business from the standpoint that we're offering services. And if we want to have prosperity in many different forms within our community, we need to treat our customers as customers, valued customers. Our actions make a big difference. So there you go. Just please, I'm asking everybody to be on good behavior.
Thank you. Moving on to a mayor's choice, I did want to just update you folks on two different issues. Dr.Cog met last week, and we passed the Metro vision that was provided in our packet at our last meeting unanimously. And I'm very proud of the Denver Regional Council of Governments' efforts in this. I think this is the first ever that passed unanimously. We dealt with some hard issues. We now meet twice a month. We now have a study session as well and an actual business meeting. So needless to say, I do think that helped in putting a lot of the different jurisdictions on the same page and working together for a regional solution. So I wanted to share that with you, that success with you. Also, I wanted to share with you that I had an opportunity to attend the Metro Mayor's retreat at DIA. I think it was not last weekend, but the weekend before. And Governor Hickenlooper came and spoke with us about municipal issues. And some other members of the state legislature came and gave us an update on some things coming down. The real biggest issue that people really focused on was construction defect issues. We are seeing a insurance bill coming through the legislature. I'm hopeful that can make some difference, but honestly, from my perspective, the Metro Mayors were very disappointed in my mind with what they view as just a small part of the overall solution. Mayor of Lakewood is really kind of our point person on lobbying on this issue on the Hill. As you folks are speaking with people, I would suggest to you that more action really needs to be taken on this issue in order to ensure that we get more condominium and for ownership product in our state. So just be aware of that issue. Right now, Dr.Cog has taken a monitor approach because they want to see, some folks are arguing this is just one of a package of legislation. And so I think that they're all taking a monitoring approach. I'm guessing CML is probably doing the same. But
they've pushed hard on this one and haven't gotten anywhere.
Agreed. For several sessions, it's really disappointing from my perspective. And so I'd like to encourage you to put this on your radar as an issue, not only for our region, but really for our entire state. We've seen over 20 municipalities statewide take action individually on this item to try to resolve this issue. Englewood is not one of them. We really only have one site, and the developer there says he's got a different solution, a private solution to this issue. And so I figure if we get even one developer says it's an issue, I feel like this is an issue we're going to have to take up. So just be aware that this is something on our radar. Going to move on to City Manager's Choice.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to pass around the agenda, and for some reason, again, we're having difficulties with getting agendas to you with this new process of working with the council. It's not that we don't want to share an agenda. It's just the logistics of getting it done. So this is the study session agenda with the tentative topics. About the regular business agenda as well. So why don't I start so the public can hear me. February 6th, these agendas for business, the regular meeting agendas are a little bit more difficult to try to forecast. So I'm into the file right now on a computer. I didn't hand this out to you, but just to let you know some of the things that you'll be seeing. We will be bringing forth an MOU with Excel Energy. As you recall, you had a presentation on the Partners Energy Program. That's coming forward for an ordinance for first reading that night. It's not on the consent calendar, by the way. Number two, you'll also have an IGA with Arapahoe County regarding acceptance of grant funding for the Northwest Greenbelt. That's kind of an exciting project. That's up in the northwest quadrant of the city. To make that project happen, that's another feather in the cap of Mr. Lee, who's an excellent grant writer and has been very diligent in getting monies for the city. So thanks, Dave. From the Wastewater treatment plant. This was in the capital budget for this year. They're replacing a biosolids trailer. So I won't get into the details of that, but they'll tell you all about it. The slate agreement's coming forward as well. So those are the items for February 6th as of right now. And I believe that that probably encapsulates everything because we have a deadline now of setting the business agenda for 2 weeks ahead of time so that all contracts can be read by our attorney in the fashion and given those time and attention that they need. As far as the study session agenda goes, you can see that the tentative agenda there. So the next study session will be on February 13th. As of right now, our Director of Community and Economic Development, Brad Power, is going to be talking about the City Center Englewood and ULI presentation that was done last fall. We're going to bring that back forward so that we can kind of gain some consensus from the council as to which direction to go with the application and implementation of the ULI study. Board and Commission Appreciation Night gift discussion. That should be a fairly short discussion, but we have that every year.
Can we ask Slate to weigh in on a way to do that well?
Okay, well, we could. And I think they may be there that night, according to the calendar. Yeah, we can do that. Thank you, Counselor. Emerald ash borer presentation. This is a big deal. As you've probably seen in many communities, the emerald ash tree is being susceptible to borers that are killing them all. And if you've seen Denver, they've been doing a wholesale,
be a smart ash.
Yeah, to be a smart ash.
Yeah.
But if they're not inoculating the trees, they're taking them out of their public facilities, which is kind of sad. But we also want to couple that with the discussion of the Japanese beetle, which has become pretty aggressive as well here in our community. So Dave Lee is going to bring in some experts, if he's not the expert himself, to talk about that. Historic preservation ordinance is being brought back for the February 13th meeting. We'll also hear from Dennis Stowe and his staff at the Littleton Englewood Wastewater Treatment Plant about VFD project. It's a design-build project they want to move forward with. It's rather large in scope and magnitude. Many of the VFDs at the plant are over 20 years old and are starting to come apart, if you will, and the replacement needs to be done pretty precisely and diligently because if we lose those, people's basements get backed up. And then we're also going to have a session, first session on PBB budget review. This particular instance, for the first time out of the chute, will be just to, again, refamiliarize the City Council with the terminology, the vocabulary, if you will, of priority-based budgeting, but also lay out the calendar for the rest of the year and how we're going to move forward with the 2018 budget's creation, and specifically hammer home some of the main themes of budgeting that I think everybody on council has been asking for. Number one, cost containment, how are we going to address that? And number two, how are we going to look at revenue and funding, and what kind of strategies we're going to have for that. We probably will scratch the surface for most of you who have the itch to deal with that, but again, you'll start to see that we'll be talking about budgeting multiple times a month. So beyond that, to go into February a little bit deeper, February 27th, we're going to start to have some of our boards and commissions come forth and present to you. The first the first one actually is Alliance for Commerce in Englewood is going to come on the 27th of February, so they'll be presenting to you what they've been working on and what their focus is. If we're fortunate enough to have the new city attorney start, we'll be talking about city council policies and procedures. Another exciting project, which is a major capital project this year, is the South Broadway improvement. Will be talked about on the 27th as well. Strategic plan update, and then also a discussion on impact fees, because we need to move forward with those because we're going to have major projects going on in town, and we want to make sure they're in place before that. And I hope to potentially maybe even have one of the consultants who put in a proposal to be present to actually talk that night. We're trying to work his schedule to just kind of give an overview of impact fees, because the city of Englewood hasn't had them, and we want to make sure that there's an understanding of what those are. Council, one of the things I did want to raise today, and just as a disclosure, but also as well as a request, I did get a call from a representative of the Colorado State Sex Offender Management Board, who was under the impression that they would just call me and I could get them on an agenda for a study session to talk about the sex offender registry restriction. And I told him that that's not how that worked, but I'd be happy to raise that issue of whether or not they wanted to come and present for 30 minutes. 30 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, but he was willing to bring some of the other experts from the Sex Offender Management Board to talk to you. And I said I'd raise that this evening before I let him know whether or not that would fly. So that's just a request of the council, and be happy to report back to this gentleman.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
I have a question. Also, when are we going to finish our discussion with the board and commission applications appointments?
Yeah, so
we're going to have to pick that up.
Yeah, February 6th, the intent too, and I didn't read through them all, but the recommended appointments that you made, or you had some sort of consensus, it's not an approval, those resolutions would come forward on February 6th. So the two holes that I think you still have, or vacancies, do need to be dealt with, unless there's also some reconsideration of moving folks to fit those. So please let us know, because I know that Nancy Fritz in the city attorney's office has prepared, predicated on your last meeting, prepared resolutions with names. But if we want to hold off on that, we can. But in some instances, obviously, there will be vacancies as of February 1st, some significant vacancies on some of the boards. So please, that's another topic for tonight too. I'm glad you brought that up.
Quorum issues.
They could, a couple of your quasi-judicial boards.
Councilmember Yates?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. So the board and commission issue, I mean, I feel like we need to, at this point, have a special meeting unless we want to kick it past February 6th, unless we want to make those decisions on the dais. What's council's pleasure there? Councilmember Yates?
If we were to have a special meeting, I think 20 minutes before the meeting or something like that, I think could handle that situation. Now, if there's some changes, obviously,
could they get the resolution done?
Yeah. if there ends up being some changes, I apologize to staff right away. But we may have to pencil in some stuff. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
I think that's a reasonable solution. Our regular session doesn't start till 7, so if we started at 6 or 5:30 in a study session prior, we could probably knock this out.
I would say we don't need an hour and a half. You said it. Yeah, no.
We set for an hour and a half last time, and we didn't even get that done. And we were going to talk about how to improve this process next time, and we didn't even get to that portion of the conversation.
And you weren't there.
Yeah.
And I will. I will say that I apologize about some of my things here recently with family stuff, and trying to get caught up with the world. But I understand. There's a tease, but that's been something.
So 6 o'clock is your recommendation?
Yeah, I tell you, 5:30 is
tough,
really
I know,
difficult because of traffic. Because a lot of times, I'm coming from the other side of the world.
So everybody else okay with 6? I'm seeing a lot of heading nods. Heads nodding. Councilmember Bernstein?
I appreciate Allison going over the list that I had done, and she had fixed a lot of that process. But you said that there was maybe potentially another, apparently for a couple of decades, maybe we had a short member on Parks and Rec. I mean, and she's doing the diligence to go through all of the charter and make sure that all of these are brought up, and also do some additional training, I guess, which was offered with this new system that kind of had some glitches with people going back and forth. So you said you thought there might be an additional person on Parks and Rec as well. Do we know all of the positions now? Are we good? Or
well, the Parks and Rec one was that the Englewood Public Schools liaison was listed
as one of the 9
as a voting member,
yeah, okay.
And so if he gets bumped as a non-voting liaison, then that's an additional seat.
Okay. So then, with the addition of that, and I greatly appreciate you going through that extra work. It's mind-boggling to think that for this long that it's a process, and you're doing a great job with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Keck.
And a point of order, this is just something for you to consider as a council, but typically when we create these resolutions and you're making a notice to the public of who's going to be appointed, if you're making a change on the fly the night of...
Ceremony is going to be the following meeting.
Yeah, it'd have to be the following meeting to do that. So
we wouldn't invite them to the 6th. We would invite folks later in February to give them their pin and their certificate.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to check on that.
But at least they would have formal... placement by the 6th, and that way these board and commissions can continue on with their business. They might even attend a first meeting prior to coming in and getting their certificate.
Yeah, I just want to check on that because we obviously don't want to create any issues.
No, fair enough. Thank you. Let's see here. The sex offender issue, we want to weigh in on that. My thought is this person should be directed to the public hearing that's already been set. Any differing thoughts on that?
I think there might have been some confusion because that night when we were talking about maybe having a forum, and then Eric said, "Oh, I could get that set up for you." Maybe that they got the impression that he was talking about the room, and so they're just thinking that they were doing that. As to what Councilmember Olson said on the dais last time, nobody ever expected you to set up my town hall for me. That was never an expectation of anybody. But you did offer to go ahead and set up the room, and so them not knowing what the process would be, I think they thought they were supposed to get in touch with you. But nobody's been in touch with me, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what's...
Yeah, and I only raised the issue because I think that they wanted to add some clarity before a public hearing on the matter. I think was his intent.
Well, that's up to the council if they want it.
Sure.
Councilmember Olson.
So I'm just looking ahead. So the April 17th and May 1st are now going to have study sessions before them, right? And that'll be put in there?
Yes. We'll need to add that in for the
preliminary financing.
Yep, financing.
Yeah. And is the calendar absolutely correct on all the dates? Because I think someone in one of our committees commissions I was on said that there were some mistakes. There aren't any mistakes, are there, besides the first month?
Yeah, Eric, do you see there's...
Oh, there are?
April 22nd.
Are we
on the student art calendar?
I know, but we can't really change it
sad.
now.
Well, if we could take a look and update some of those dates, we'd appreciate it.
It's the calendar from the children that we all are
hanging. The art
calendar. I heard that comment tonight. In fact, that some folks it's listed as a regular meeting tonight on the art calendar, and maybe we should be differentiating between study sessions and regular sessions on those calendars.
And we have the longest day of the year in April, according to the calendar. It happens twice. So I apologize for that.
Pushed it all off.
Yeah.
And I did notice there's a typo, I think, in the first page. Anyway, we'll try to get those tightened up. I will say that I think, Mr. Keck, if you wouldn't mind touching base with Slade and figuring out when is appropriate time for them to come back on the state of the city issue and find out when an appropriate time for that is. I'm also going to suggest that we do have policy and procedures, just one kind of small. It probably, in my mind, needs to be peppered in here so that we can talk, about what we're dealing with and what changes we might want to make. I think that Mrs. Brown probably needs a couple of opportunities throughout, I would say, March and April, through, and pepper a couple of opportunities in so that we can continue that conversation going and we don't feel like we need to make room for it as we go. And it's always easier, I found, as we're doing these scheduling to remove items rather than add them back in. So as we see kind of long-term conversations happening, I think we should be sprinkling them in and leaving a little bit of time and room for those. Other questions or comments regarding the schedule?
You want to do that with study sessions.
Correct, study sessions.
Instead, we might want to add in maybe 45 minutes before regular meeting on some of this in case we have February 27th has a very long list, March 27th
Agreed. Agreed.
So you could bring us in at 6 one night.
I think that's a fabulous comment, Mr. Keck. I feel like as we feel like our agendas, we went through the holiday season recently, things slowed down a little bit. As we build momentum throughout the year, like we're going to, as we come into budget season, things are going to come really tight. And so I think council is open. We talked a little bit at our interview night, and you were not there, but we talked a little bit about all of our willingness to re-implement a study session prior to regular meeting as needed. We didn't want to quite say that we wanted to have them every time, but we're very open to that. And so as scheduling becomes tight, please propose that in future tentative topics, and we can approve that as it happens. So if he says, hey, I think we should have one this night, we can all say that we're available and commit to that on an as-needed basis. Other questions or comments regarding scheduling? Councilmember Yates.
This is a question about on the schedule here. Is there a possibility that we can have this inputted into the Outlook calendar that council has? For the folks who use technology, frankly, it would make this job a lot easier to keep track of, and if things get changed, then we'll be notified automatically. It'll just be changed in our schedule. So
Yeah, I think we can work something out on this calendar. Yeah.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Keck?
No, sir. Thank you.
With the city attorney out sick, I will now adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone, for their participation tonight.